Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Max Frequency Podcast. I am your host, Max Roberts, and I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by my friend, I'm going to call him the Xbox expert, Jerrad Wyche. Jerrad, welcome back to the show.
Well, those are heavy words. I don't know if I'd consider myself an expert. I do know a little bit about Xbox, but thank you. Also, distinct, making me sound very like royalty. I like it.
It is. I have the distinct pleasure of being able to bring my friends and guests to the show. I love it. I feel truly honored every time I do an episode of these, and I mean that genuinely for every single person that comes on the show. So thank you, buddy, for taking the time to talk to me. You are the first person I think of when I think and talk about Xbox. My brain goes to you as someone like in my life who knows a lot about it. So when I call you the Xbox expert, that's what I think of you as. So I mean it. You do know a lot. And I'm excited to have you here because the last time you were on the show was like 3 years ago, same time of year, June of 21, and we were talking Xbox and Nintendo. But a lot's changed. A lot has changed in those 3 years, both for Xbox and personally between the both of us. And I just I've been thinking about you, and I wanted to have you back on the show. So I'm really excited to talk about all this stuff today.
You know, it's funny you say I come to your mind when you think about Xbox. Unfortunately, it seems like I've been tied to a lot of not so great things recently, previous to the Xbox showcase. So maybe I brought some levity to you when you were reading about Xbox. You're like, oh yeah, Jerrad. So
yeah, it's when I say a lot has happened to Xbox over at Microsoft, it's truly a lot. Like $70 billion a lot, which is actually, I was looking on the calendar of things, and that happened a few months, I think, after you were on the show last time in 2021, if I remember checking the clocks and timed correctly. Like, it's been this long of a process for them to kind of finalize this purchase of Activision Blizzard King. And I want to know what you think of this, because that's obviously not a small chunk of change, but huge implications of just what they're bringing in from Call of Duty to Blizzard and World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Candy Crush. Like, those are just the big obvious moneymakers, but there's a lot in that catalog of games from Activision. What did you think about that over the last 3 years or so?
So there's like three different perspectives I kind of have on it. There's the like pure business perspective. There's the like supporter of the industry perspective, and then there's the fan perspective, right? So the easiest one is the fan perspective, in that as somebody who owns an Xbox, who subscribes to Xbox Game Pass, I thought it was awesome, right? You're going to potentially soon, now in 2024 and beyond, going to get all of the old Call of Duty games, all of the Crash games, the Spyro games, potentially the Transformers games if there's no weird licensing stuff on the Xbox catalog, which is huge. And I just like that as a player of video games, I'm going to have the opportunity to access all of that. Also, the whole thing with, Phil Spencer coming out, and we'll get to this later when we talk about the showcase, but he came out and talked about how there's going to be parity across Call of Duty releases, which is also huge. Not weird pre-order bonuses and exclusive skins and all that, which is nice. The supporter of the industry perspective, consolidation is never a good thing. It leads to redundancies, which lead to layoffs. It also is always concerning when via consolidation, there's less publishers out there, right? Everything's kind of under 3 tent poles. So that's not good. Obviously, there's so much more minutia you can get into there, but yeah, that's kind of a weird feeling there. If you were to rate it, from a fan perspective, 10 out of 10. The support is kind of like a 5. There's some pluses and negatives, and it's kind of iffy. From a business perspective, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because, as we've seen with Xbox, they are still committed to Xbox, but they also are committed to the brand and making sure that they have games everywhere. With a purchase at large, you're looking for profit margins, right? So it's no surprise that the exclusivity thing isn't as bolted down as people would have assumed that Call of Duty didn't become exclusive. It's such a big IP that's they couldn't have justified that to Satya Nadella and the rest of Microsoft without saying like, oh, we're still going to continue to bring in those profit margins you see on this document, but we're going to kind of implement ways in which it can grow the Xbox brand as well. So that one I totally understand. That one isn't really rated because that's just like a business perspective. Like it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my overall thoughts. And, it took like 3 years for it to happen, but I do appreciate the due process of everyone checking their P's and Q's. Obviously, not everything was altruistic in the desires to get this thing blocked. There was some weird stuff going on, as there always is. But it is also very weird when these things pass with no red flags or checks. So, yeah, it is what it is. It was going to take that long regardless, and I'm kind of thankful it did for the perspective of, the economy in this country and employees and all of that stuff. Like I think everything was handled the way it should have been handled for the most part, loosely speaking. But yeah, as an Xbox fan, it's awesome. As a games industry person, it's kind of scary. And as a business perspective, it makes total sense.
I like all of that. I really actually that resonates with me. And when I look at it, I think of it as almost as this strange justification for Game Pass in a way. And the goal is to just bolster that catalog as much as possible with as much in-house stuff, and then keep bringing in those second and third party deals as time goes on. Because clearly the subscription model for games is here to stay, and not just a Game Pass perspective, but the same applies to PlayStation Plus and its mess of tiers now. Nintendo is doing that with Nintendo Switch Online and subscribing for classic games in that library and catalog. Apple Arcade does the same thing. There are different services that do the same sort of thing. It's that Netflix model, or if we want to keep it in video games, GameFly, a model of essentially just renting games with a certain range of access and things come and go as contracts and the market dictates and things like that. And so buying this absurdly large catalog that does fit so well with the Microsoft angle of it's not just Xbox, but also PC games like World of Warcraft or, what's that other game? The really Star something. I'm totally blanking on it.
Oh, there's StarCraft, World of Warcraft,
Hearthstone. Yeah, like Hearthstone. All of these multi-platform and recurring revenue games that will help bolster that and both help bring back the $70 billion part of things, but also help bolster Game Pass and get more people to adopt this subscribe mentality, but still give people the option to buy games for their console, for their PC, having that cross-buy move, which Sony was doing with the PS3 and the Vita, and which is great. So cross-buy is awesome. It makes sense in that way. I just don't think the price of Game Pass is currently sustainable. And I think it's been bumped up once before, but I suspect it will be bumped up again as we go forward into the future. But like you also said, when you buy a bunch of teams that have similar jobs as the teams you already have, you end up laying off a lot of people. There's overlap, consolidation. This happened when they bought Bethesda ZeniMax, and now this is just a much larger scale. One article, I think, from CNBC that I read talked about how they laid off 1,900 people at the start of 2024, and that was before they shut down 3 or 4 studios, most notably Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks. Tango, I think, being the most surprising of the bunch, and Arcane more so to me in name, in its association with Arcane. Not necessarily surprising after Redfall. Yeah.
Yep.
Which was just, I don't, that hurt. That one hurt. Not because I was looking forward to Redfall necessarily, but more just like the idea seems so cool and the studio is right. But reading and watching some of the turmoil that kind of just went on in that game's development because it happened during the acquisition, and it seemed like all eyes in Microsoft were on Starfield, that they kind of got lost in the shuffle, it sounds like. And it's a shame that happened that way. But this seems to be kind of the talk of the town lately, is all of these closures, because it's not just Microsoft and Xbox. I think it's just most notable that they closed these 3 or 4. How are you feeling about that? Like, they've got all these studios. They're like, we have Xbox Game Studios, we have Bethesda, and now Activision. Like, we're really proud of our, for lack of a better word, suite of studios. Sony does the same thing. PlayStation Studios, we've got all these teams, and they should be proud of all of them. They all produce a wide range of games, varying quality, and for different markets. So how are you feeling about the shutdown of these teams?
So one thing I want to preface with is that we've learned from WB that sometimes stuff happens behind the scenes for weird business and tax credit reasons. That aren't necessarily cutting stuff to gain profit or, change the receipts at the end of the day. Sometimes there's these weird clauses business wise that aid in. It's just stuff we'll never understand, or maybe not understand, but it's just stuff that we'll never know about necessarily. Alpha Dog.
I was going to say, I think that's what The Last of Us Online, I think that's what happened there. Because that was years and years of work poured into it, and they were just like, yeah, we're going to shut this down. It's clearly there's tax write-offs and benefits somehow through all of this, and Warner Brothers is a good example of that.
Well, and there's also the conversation of is Naughty Dog at a point now where if they have something released attached to them that isn't so clearly a prestige thing, that Sony would rather eat the money invested in it than deteriorate the brand. There's that whole question too. So with these 3 studios specifically, Alpha Dog is more of a support studio. And by no means am I saying that they deserve to get shut down. I'm just going based off of what makes sense, right, for things that got shut down. Arcane Austin, honestly, was just one of those things that it fell under the games as service curse of these studios, trying to make a games as service. Stuff goes wrong, also outside of their control, like you said, with the acquisition. But it's just obviously a genre and style of game that people have been chasing, and we're seeing the end rows of that, especially with Sony, with Concord and stuff, that a lot of them are not going to hit. Everyone's chasing that Fortnite bag, and unfortunately, you're not going to. Honestly, what it reminds me of a lot of is the World of Warcraft chase of everyone coming out with an MMO in the 2000s, and everyone. There were some that survived and were good, like EverQuest and stuff, but there were so many that tried to hit that MMO target because they saw that money and it just didn't work. And it's a shame that Arcane Austin got closed because of that. Obviously, Arcane as a whole is very talented. I'm very excited for Blade. Can't wait because I'm a Marvel boy as well. Tango Gameworks is the one that actually makes the least amount of sense to me. And, I know most people approached it from Hi-Fi Rush. How can you close a studio that just released that? Totally get that. I loved Hi-Fi Rush. It's one of my favorite games of last year. The thing that doesn't make sense to me is, and this is where I think people misconstrue who's in charge of closing these studios. Not to say that Phil Spencer didn't play a part. I'm not saying he's blameless. But I also don't believe that he necessarily was the one that was like, okay, I'll choose this studio, this studio, this studio. I think it was more higher up at Microsoft. Anyways, with Tango Gameworks, they've talked about so much establishing a foothold in Japan to some extent. This is their only Japanese studio. So to close them makes zero sense.
Yep.
If we're purely looking at a number standpoint, out of almost all of the studios they own, they exist in probably one of the cheapest areas to run a video game developer. So that also does not make sense. So the only thing I can think of is, his name's escaping me. Is it Shinji Mikami?
Yeah, from the Capcom fame. Resident Evil 4, 1, all the stuff. Made Evil Dead, right?
Evil Within.
Evil Within, thank you. Evil Dead is
so many evil, so many evil things. He left, and I wonder if there was a lack of true leadership available at that studio, or if there was something weird that happened where Microsoft didn't really believe in the leadership coalition there to lead the studio forward. That one is one that doesn't make sense to me at all. I can see arguments for the others. It's just that one is just so weird. And it's not even from, like I said, Hi-Fi Rush was a great game. Why? It's more so, like I said, it being in a cheap place to run a game studio, it being their only foothold in Japan. Very odd.
Yeah, it's just one of those studios and decisions that, like, I'm sure somewhere on a spreadsheet in a conference room, it makes total sense, right? When you look at it stacked up against everything. But then you get situations where we have Microsoft executives like Matt Booty saying, we want smaller, more darling games. I don't have the exact quote, but it's along those lines of like smaller game of the year type contender games that are unique and frankly help stand out in the space. And clearly Microsoft saw value in Hi-Fi Rush so much that it's going multi-platform, which is another kind of, it's not crazy decision, but if you had said this 5-7 years ago, it would be a little crazy. But, Microsoft has brought over Sea of Thieves, Hi-Fi Rush, Grounded, those two in particular, Grounded and Sea of Thieves, more of those recurring revenue games, and opening up that player base to an even wider audience. It just makes sense from a business perspective for that type of game, right? Chasing that bag, as you put it. Those are the games you want to get to as many people as possible, right? So that they keep investing their money and their time into those things back into your studios and into your bottom line from a business perspective. And more people can just play and have fun on those games. So Tango Gameworks was so surprising. And another thing you said, which was, cheap-ish place to run a studio, which just the timing on this next bit of news was just so poor because it was like right after they shut down these studios. Activision, aka Microsoft, it's so weird because they get to keep their name separate, kind of like Bethesda does, but it's all owned by Microsoft. But they announced a new studio, which obviously was in the works well before all these other decisions happened. But they announced Elsewhere Entertainment, which is being set up in Poland, which is
Elsewhere.
Or is it Elsewhere? Did I type that wrong? It is Elsewhere. I don't know why I typed Elsewhere. Elsewhere Entertainment. But it's being set up in Poland, and they're working on some new IP. They're very excited. They have talent from all over the place. But CD Projekt Red is over in Poland, and is my understanding, some tax credits, government things, fairly cheap place comparatively. Certainly, I feel confident in saying cheaper than the San Francisco Bay Area to run a game studio.
Maybe.
I would think. So that's cool. New studio's interesting, but it feels, I don't even know what the right word is, but it doesn't feel right to shut these teams down and then go, and now we have a new team. Like the order of those just didn't feel right.
Yeah, it is weird. One thing too that we can consider with Tango, because it's the one studio in Japan, is it could be one of those weird business logistics things too, because they have a lot of studios in North America, they have a lot of studios in like Europe, and having one studio all the way in Japan, it could be a weird logistics thing of when they're having to cut studios, they're like, well, it's the one that's farthest out of the way in terms of travel and getting resources to them and from that. You know what I mean? Could have been one of those weird things too, unfortunately.
Yeah.
With Elsewhere Entertainment, I'm not excited at all for the simple fact that until we see what their game is, I am not going to believe that they are not a Call of Duty support studio. So I know they've said they're working on a new IP, but until it's stated and we see what they're working on, I am not going to believe they're anything other than a Call of Duty support studio, which sucks, but
it is it feels like that's the curse of certain studios and teams. I wrote down in the notes the initiative vibes, because when they created that studio, made that announcement a whopping 6 or 7 years ago, they were like, and we're right in, I think this one was like right in Santa Monica, and we're pulling talent from PlayStation Santa Monica Studios and Naughty Dog and Riot and like those, huge prolific studios right there, so that they could pull in that talent, which is great. That's a great decision to build a studio. And then they've been spending the last 6-7 years working on building a team, building games, probably multiple ideas, but then finally landing on Perfect Dark, which we will be talking about later. But I just kind of get the same vibe of that announcement, that initial initiative announcement, which was like, and we're going to make new IP, and we're here, and it's this great new studio for us to have into the collection, into the suite. as it were.
New studios are hard to make,
Yeah.
man. I mean, this isn't even just an Xbox thing. You talk about like what's Jade Raymond's studio that like PlayStation acquired, Haven.
Yeah, and that
you
was
look at,
was a
like,
Google thing, and then the whole Fallout was Stadia.
Stadia. I mean, you even look like Ken Levine with Cloud Chamber. Everyone's been wondering where. Those are two different things. Ken Levine working on Judas, but Cloud Chamber, which is like the studio out of Ken Levine's ashes for 2K, working on that new BioShock.
Yes,
Like we haven't seen anything about that. Like, and that's the other point of like closing these studios is it seems like fixing and maintaining a currently existing studio seems a lot easier than spinning up one out of thin air. You know what I mean?
yeah, and like I mean, speaking of Ken Levine, his team Ghost Story is still owned by 2K, but based off some interviews lately, I think in particular one with Colin Moriarty over at Sacred Symbols, one of the Plus interviews or something, talked about how he essentially was just given time, right, to build out Judas and experiment with this Lego block decision type system that is designed, but 2K has to, I mean, clearly they see value in it because they've let Ken Levine do it. They're going to push this game out and presumably keep him around afterward in the studio and the tech and whatever they built. But when you're just looking at numbers, you look at how much it cost to have Ken Levine work on this game for the last 12 years. I know he didn't start right after Infinite, and then you look at Grand Theft Auto 5 and you're like, well, that printed money, which then theoretically helps sustain Ghost Story.
Yeah, here's the thing: is like with Ken Levine too. I love Ken Levine, but like a lot of the minutia of Judas is obviously going to be some new stuff. But let's call it what it is. It is a BioShock clone. Like you look at the gameplay, and it's a BioShock clone. Like, come on now.
Oh no, absolutely. I'm here for it, and it's been so long since we've had a BioShock game, and it makes it even all the more interesting that there is another BioShock game in the works. To have it and Judas kind of like be in the same rough space. Really waiting for the announcement of BioShock officially, but it's...
Which worries me that this new BioShock from 2K might be some weird multiplayer thing. Like that's
I hadn't heard that.
No, I haven't heard that. This is all just in my own thoughts of like logistically, right? Like, okay, if they have Judas coming out and they're working with that, feasibly, would they want another single player BioShock game to come out anywhere near that, right?
Right.
So I'm like, well, but part of me is like, they haven't had Cloud Chamber show that game, so maybe it is the same. It is a single player BioShock narrative, which would be dope. But could it be that it is this weird multiplayer games as service thing that they're chasing, you know? So
I hope not. Remember when BioShock 2 had multiplayer?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Weird.
Is there... I wanted to check. You talking about this? BioShock is getting an adaptation. Is it coming? It says to Netflix. Netflix is working on it. Huh. I feel
that could be really good if done right.
I was thinking like it could be kind of a Fallout-y scenario, and maybe they're holding part of it. Let's see. 2K's Cloud Chamber Studio is deep in active development on the next iteration of the series. And coupled with our partnership with Netflix, we remain highly confident that BioShock will continue to captivate and engage audiences like never before. So it could be in part tied to the game in a sense of like wanting some synergy there, which is something that Fallout seems to be missing. And we might talk about that a little bit later as well, because I noticed I was talking about this with Logan. And apparently Fallout 76's numbers went up after it, and even the resale value on Fallout 4 and like Fallout New Vegas and stuff went up. The resale market, they just shot up because of the TV show. And so I think companies are seeing a lot more of like, let's try and get these kind of close together to be released so that we can...
Real quick, on your mention of the BioShock Netflix show, which I even forgot was a thing. My dream scenario for that would be, they recently announced that Arcane Season 2 is coming out in November of 2024, and it's going to be the last season of that show.
Mm-mm.
God, if Netflix could just have that animation studio do a BioShock animated thing, Arcane is arguably the most beautiful animated thing outside of like obviously like Inside and Across the Spider-Verse that I've ever seen. Like an animated BioShock with their art skills would be phenomenal. Did that thing say if it was live action or not, or did it just said Netflix and BioShock partnership?
I'm looking at whattowatch.com. It doesn't seem to say. Oh no, live action adaptation.
Okay, those are a little bit scarier. Not that they can't be accomplished, but I think it's way easier to deliver an animation than it is live action. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We shall see. There's no shortage of video game adaptations these days. That's for sure.
And good ones, finally.
Yes, very good ones. Castlevania is killer. Castlevania on Netflix.
Agreed.
Chef kiss, so good. But with all of that, I mean, it's been tumultuous might be too strong, but it's been a busy 3 years for Xbox. But the future is pretty bright, I think, based off of the showcase. And I wanted to guess just like your overall impressions, overall thoughts on this Xbox game showcase for 2024 here in E3, not E3. Don't call it E3.
The Jeff Keighley's.
The Keighley's, the summer Keighley's, whatever you want to call it. But like, how are you feeling after watching this almost 2-hour showcase?
So, you want me to give like in addition to my general thoughts, you want me to give like a review, like out of 10? Like a number?
Yeah, lay it on me, dude.
Okay, so what I'll first say is I personally believe that like the last 3 or 4 years of Xbox showcases have been at the very least good. I think it's been a while since they've had like a bad showcase, which is impressive because there were times there where they weren't great. I mean, you go all the way back to Don Matrick and the TV stuff.
Buy a 360.
But yeah,
Oh
man,
my
you know what's funny? Whenever I think of that stuff, it's kind of related now because of Blizzard. But like you own a phone, right? The Diablo stuff. Oh, so
yeah.
Anyways, so this showcase incredible. I think it even stands out more so because of how lackluster Summer Game Fest opening night, whatever the hell you call it, and the state of play was. To be frank, I went into the state of play with proper expectations because they set them that way. I didn't expect to see anything crazy. And unfortunately, the last several years, state of play to me is like, oh, this isn't going to have all the good stuff, right? You might have like one.
You
got
to have the word showcase for it to be cool.
Exactly. Now that said, Astrobot looks incredible. Cannot wait. So, but compared to those, I think it even made this Xbox showcase look even better by comparison. I would give this like a 9.5 out of 10. That 0.5 is for some nitpicks we might talk about later on. But specifically, I thought it had a good range and variety of games. I think it was mostly centered on Xbox owned stuff. And if it wasn't, almost everything else except for maybe a couple of games launch day one in Game Pass, which is always huge and it's a priority for them, which I love to see because as a person who primarily plays on Xbox and subscribes to Game Pass, it's just the value increases and it makes that subscription, which may even increase as we might talk about in a bit, not that hard on my wallet. You know what I mean? So I thought it was incredible. I do my own show notes during the live events because I'm weird like that. And I like to mark the stuff that I'm interested in. And out of the 30 things they showed, I was interested in 21 of them to various extents, obviously. But yeah, it was, and you know, going into any showcase or live event, you're not going to be interested in everything. And you shouldn't be because it should be well-rounded for and catered to different interests. So I thought it was awesome. Like I said, 9.5 out of 10. And yeah, the future is bright. And we'll talk about all the stuff we saw here pretty shortly.
Yeah, I went into the showcase. Here's how I'll put it. I thought this was one of their best showcases. It was a good sampling of like what's to come, filled with exciting stuff from their first party. It had this really cool. I feel like I haven't seen this at a major summer platform holders kind of like presentation in a while. It had a very cool variety of second, third-party games reveals or what have you. Not, you know, I feel like the stuff that Sony's been showing in a second-party capacity has been fairly predictable in the sense of here's a Final Fantasy game or here's another Soulsborne clone type thing. This had interesting variety from a second, third-party perspective that I appreciated. It felt like an older E3 presentation, and I really actually kind of savored that and enjoyed it. It had, I'm looking at my predictions that I had. It didn't have quite the things that I expected, but that's not like a knock at it. The one thing that I was, if I were to say disappointed, which feels even strong, I just kind of wanted more gameplay. And from games that are supposed to be coming out this year, I just would have liked to see more of what am I going to be doing in them instead of just watching cutscenes and or trailers of things flying by. That was kind of what was missing. I think that's more of just the nature where these things have to be, the pace has to be a certain speed or whatever. You're going to lose people. Gone are the days of a developer on stage doing a demo live for 5 to 10 minutes. That just doesn't happen anymore, which I think is a shame to some degree, at least for some of these bigger games. So overall, a really solid showcase. If I had to throw a number to it, 9, sure. I felt good about it, even with the stuff that I, didn't really care for.
But here's the thing too: in the modern age, like, I understand where you're coming from with the lack of extended gameplay demos, but we are at a point now where those end up being like ancillary extra streams that happen after the show, right? Like Xbox did one for 4 games this week. And then obviously they had the Call of Duty Direct after the showcase, and they had the one for Starfield last year. And I do think, for me, I think the pacing is more important because if people want to get the deeper dive gameplay and you provide that, people will go watch that. Mm-hmm. And with these, you have to kind of cater to the widest audience possible.
Yeah.
So, and I think that is something where maybe me and you differ on, where I don't want to see extended gameplay demos and developers coming out and talking about the game during a presentation, because Ubisoft still does that, and their showcases are horrendous. You know what I mean? So
that Ubisoft forward was something, man. Now that was a really throwback feel of old E3, and part
and it was
of
miles
that
better
I love
than last year's, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's I enjoy that for a different reason.
Yeah.
But let's dive into the showcase. We've built out all of the things that they revealed, and we've highlighted the things that we specifically want to touch on at some point. And I did just want to call out that the showcase does kick off right away with a Call of Duty teaser, which of course it did, because they spent so much money and it is coming to Game Pass, which was a big kind of question mark for a bit of like, well, do they put it on Game Pass or does it have to be something they charge for? And they're continuing to stick to their guns on, if it is an Xbox Game Studios / under our umbrella, it comes to Game Pass day one. And I admire that, because I'm sure that is a hefty financial decision to some degree, especially the first one. And now it sets an expectation where Call of Duty games just need to come to Game Pass now. So they opened with that, and then they end the show with a direct, like a 25-minute deep dive, which I actually really enjoy that idea for them to pick one game. They're kind of their big fall game so far based off the last 2 now, and really sink their teeth into it. And both games have been games with massive audiences. So I appreciate that and respect it. But shortly after that,
and going forward,
yeah,
real quick, I just want to mention, people were scared, like, oh, is it just going to be the Call of Duty Direct every year? No, they had to make sure to show a sense of power that they own Call of Duty now, and that's why it was the game for this fall.
Yeah,
I would almost guarantee you it's going to be very rare, unless there's some like really bad stuff with the scheduling of their releases, where Call of Duty is that 30-minute direct after the showcase. They had to do it this year because it's Call of Duty's theirs now, and the other argument is we've already seen enough of Avowed and Indiana Jones. Those are your other two big fall releases. So people shouldn't be worried that Call of Duty is going to be the end-all, be-all direct for these things moving forward forever.
Wholly agree with that. And if they want to do a 20-minute deep dive on Call of Duty, they can just do that
whenever.
Whenever. They even said during that event, I think, check out our multiplayer reveal or whatever at the Call of Duty event in August. Like, it's not...
Yeah.
They will have zero problems getting their Call of Duty message out to the people that want to know. This year, it just makes the most sense for it to be there. So I wholeheartedly agree with you. It has to be a flex. It had to be the one this year, and it helps kind of pad some things out. But Phil then comes on stage and talks about the industry and where they're at and how excited he is, typical stuff. And then he gets to introduce Doom, the Dark Ages, basically medieval Doom. And the chat I was in kind of popped off from the sense of, like, how cool is it that the Doomslayer now has a chainsaw shield and can ride a dragon? Just very silly mashup of Doom and medieval goofiness that fits. How did you feel about Doom?
So I love Doom. Doom 2016 is one of my favorite games, one of my favorite first-person shooters. I bought Doom Eternal and it was one of those games I bought, never got to it. Now with Doom the Dark Ages coming out, I'm planning to go back, play that, and its DLC. It looked awesome. I do appreciate that we're in a place where these AAA developers feel as if they can do some really wacky video game stuff with their video games. You don't have to take things too seriously. You know what I mean? And, you didn't even mention, like, the fur cape he's rocking.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like, it's medieval with the largest air quotes you've ever seen, right? Because he's still sporting, like, futuristic military-grade armor and stuff like that. And it's hokey and weird and funny.
He has a shotgun.
I love the... Yeah, exactly.
You have to have a gun.
The gun that shoots skulls, and people actually, like, zoomed in and did a GIF where it like actively animates the skull getting crushed as the bullets fire out. Incredible stuff.
That gun in particular reminded me of Insomniac and, like, Ratchet and Clank and just
for sure,
zany weapon design. And I think that skull gun gives me kind of a hope that they're going to have even more kind of goofy, light, having fun with it gun design that, it doesn't all have to just be shotgun assault rifle. And Doom Doom has really cool guns, but just a skull
give me a
gun
crossbow that shoots spines.
Yeah,
give me a crossbow that shoots spines. Fit the aesthetic.
Exactly.
The mech is incredible. That it was very quick. You barely saw it, but it was him the Doomslayer hopping into a mech, fighting another large beast, and then we saw the dragon stuff. It looks fun, and I think Doom is able to walk this line of being incredibly hyper violent, action-packed, first-person greatness that people want, but then it's able to add in these stuff that make it more wacky. It's like if Duke Nukem was respectable, you know what I mean? Like, it's awesome. I can't wait for this game. Launching in Game Pass, also coming to PS5, which some people are upset about. If you're somebody that ever complains about games coming to other platforms, go to therapy. Like, who cares? I just have no energy for that, man. It's like, first of all, it's going to be better for id because more people get to play the game they made. Second of all, it's going to be better for Xbox because it's more revenue. Like, I am not that caught up on it. Like, the big thing for me is this launching day one in Game Pass to provide value as to why I own an Xbox? Awesome. Cool. Sold. Like, I don't care that it's coming to PS5, man. I don't know why people are so hung up on that, but it is the internet.
It is definitely the internet. And there was never a doubt in my mind that it was going to come to PlayStation. Doom specifically. Starfield, I understand. And actually, I'm now in the camp of I think Starfield will eventually just be ported to PS5, given the recent, like, more games are just coming cross-platform from them. I think they will, almost similar to the way that Sony holds on to their exclusives for a good year or two and then puts them on PC. I kind of feel like Xbox might take a similar route to tap into those markets. Makes sense to me. But we'll see. Doom always made sense, though, because Doom has a legacy of running on everything, and the last two games were on PlayStation. It's like, there's no reason to burn that bridge with the community in that sense. It just makes sense for them and for all the reasons you said. So I did want to say another thing that's happened in the 3 years since was the whole Mick Gordon situation over Doom Eternal soundtrack. And I just have to say, like, I don't remember what his last name is, but Marty, I can't believe he's
O'Donnell.
Still Marty O'Donnell. No, that's the Halo guy.
That's a Halo guy, yeah.
Who also has had some issues, and I think now is running for the Senate or Congress in a weird world.
Political
I don't know.
position, yeah.
Anyway, but Marty, the guy over at id, the fact that he is still in charge over there kind of upsets me based off everything that I've read and have understood.
He's never the public-facing guy, though, right? Because they always have, what's his name, the other dude. I don't remember his name.
Yes.
But, Marty is like a more fair-complected guy, and the other guy is a darker complexion. I don't remember his name, but he's the one that's always public-facing. He's incredible. He was like in the No Clip documentary. Man, what is his name? He's great. And, yeah, I think they're kind of understand that Marty isn't necessarily liked, so they make sure that he's not the one out there doing interviews and
stuff. I think I would love for that situation to be corrected as best
handled.
As possible in the favor of Mick Gordon based off everything he wrote and all of those receipts. So we'll see how they get sorted out. But that definitely was lingering in the background for me. And I know it's easy to. I mean, Doom itself looks great, and I don't want that to reflect poorly on the game. Like that, there are hundreds of people at id and whoever else is supporting this game. Like their livelihood and the hard work that they are putting into this game shouldn't be impacted that way. But in the sense of just he's still there in a position of power like that, kind of irks me. Anyway, I digress. We moved on into the State of Decay 3 trailer. This one felt like a what is it? I want to say a shoe-in. I was trying to say a shoe-in and something in the bag, and so I came up with shoe in the bag in my brain. It was a shoe-in and in the bag for State of Decay 3 to show up. This was one of the ones I was a little surprised we didn't see any gameplay of, but I guess State of Decay is State of Decay. So interesting.
So real quick, this is a game that a lot of people didn't think was going to be here because I don't know how familiar you are with the Undead Labs situation, but the founder of Undead Labs, Jeff something, I don't remember his last name. Basically, a thing came out, as we've seen too many times in the recent years, toxic workplace culture, very bad stuff. I wish I had an article to point you to check it out, but yeah, very bad stuff with Undead Labs. The whole development cycle seemed like it was not doing well. He ended up starting a new studio, and recently a thing came out. It was where like he fired everybody on one day's notice. I don't know if you remember that story.
I'm seeing this now in Wikipedia. He founded Possibility Space in New Orleans, Louisiana. I remember this because it was in New Orleans. I thought that was an interesting location to set up a studio. Working joyfully in an interview with AAA. And then in April, so 2 months ago, Strain closed the studio, citing cancellation of the publishing relationship. Wow. Okay.
Not a good guy. I'll do allegedly for legal reasons, but not a good guy allegedly. Jeff Strand, right? Is his name? I can't remember
Jeff,
his last name. Strain, yeah. So basically, Undead Labs had a bunch of stuff going on, which sucks because everyone has been excited for State of Decay 3 because it is the jump from indie AA to AAA in terms of budget, scope, all of that stuff. It's the first game Undead Labs is making under Microsoft with their support, right? Because they were in development on State of Decay 2 when they got acquired. So everyone's been really excited about the jump. I have friends who, despite the zombie genre becoming played out, we're kind of coming back on it again. And I have friends who love State of Decay 2, and a lot of them will tell you there's just a couple of things. If they work on these, polish, budget, whatever it needs to be, that this can be a really incredible multiplayer zombie experience. So a lot of people didn't expect to see this game at all, Max, because it was in development hell. This is like on perfect dark area to better
okay, because that is one I definitely gave up hope of seeing, and then was just flabbergasted that it showed up. So
yeah, and we did see gameplay for State of Decay 3. It was no HUD, no nothing, but there were segments, and there was an interview that came out after the showcase that said it was in-engine rendered gameplay. Obviously, it's not I would love to see like actual gameplay, but that was Max, for people in the know on State of Decay 3, that was more than any of us expected to see. Like for it to be there at all was a surprise, let alone seeing hints at gameplay and the themes represented with, keeping the memory of your fallen ones and all that stuff. So this is like a huge plus for the Xbox community, because a lot of people are like, oh, there's no shot. Is it vaporware? Like, what's happening because of all of the Jeff Strain situation and all that. So,
okay. See, Xbox expert coming in providing context, because to me I was like, this game's has been announced forever, like it's got to show up by now. That was my thought process. Speaking of another game stuck in development hell, Dragon Age the Veilguard was the next game
of the show for me.
Okay, so you correct me if I'm wrong, but I was not expecting this art style at all. I recall Inquisition, I think, looking more like a traditional Western RPG a la Witcher type styling. This felt more animated, honestly, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it is a negative association. What was that Fable game that was like a dungeon master thing where like it was asymmetrical multiplayer where Fable people were...
Legends. I played the alpha, the one that got canceled, right? When
it got totally
canceled.
Yeah. It reminded me of that visually, which I don't know why that popped in my head, but I was just like, I was thrown off by the art style so much that I actually thought that this was maybe a different Dragon Age game, because I thought it had a different name, but it was renamed or something. Like, fill me in on this. It's your game of the show.
Okay.
And Dragon Age was a big get to see.
Yeah, so by game of the I guess I should rephrase, it was my game of like Summer Game Fest, because after the showcase, 20 minutes of gameplay was dropped by BioWare, which looks incredible, and I'm very excited. And the one thing I want to point out real quick, sometimes, I'm oftentimes these days, it's kind of why I don't have a Facebook account anymore. You read stuff online and you're like, I just don't understand how people watch the same thing I watch. Like, I just don't get it, right? So, to your point, Inquisition was more traditional, realistic, Western RPG looking in art style. The original Dragon Age was more so like this, where it's like kind of off human proportions, a little bit more cartoony. So this is closer in art style to the original Dragon Age. Obviously, it looks way more beautiful. People watched that trailer and they were like, what's with the MCUification of Dragon Age? What's going on here? This looks awful. I'm like, it's a character introductory trailer. Like, it's not like they're like, I'll give you a perfect example. Concord, right? Yeah. Concord showed that trailer. That was definitely Guardians of the Galaxy. I was like, oh, it's absolutely. Just literally, I can point character to character. That big dude is Drax. He's Star-Lord. Like, it's crazy.
Exactly.
But then you see the gameplay, and the gameplay does the opposite, where the cinematic pulled you in because there was so much personality. It was fun. Sure, it was a Guardians clone, but it had personality. But then you watch the gameplay for it, and it's like, what makes this any different than any other hero shooter? And there's a game coming up on the Xbox showcase that I think showed off a reason for that more than Concord. Bringing it back to Dragon Age: The Veilguard, it was just a character introductory trailer. I don't know how you think, like, the game's going to be an MCU, the game's going to be this, the game's going to be that. It's like, do you want them to introduce all of these characters in a serious tone? Because that sounds awful. I don't know. I just didn't understand that. And people were like making all these assumptions, as the internet does, based on the game. And then BioWare was like, yo, chill. We're releasing 20 minutes of gameplay in a couple of days. Just watch it and understand it's classic Dragon Age. And it's classic Dragon Age. There's blood. There's, all the gameplay mechanics you'd expect. There is one difference in that in this one, you can't control your other party members entirely. You can go into your menu and control the attacks they do, kind of like turn-based combat, but not really, if you know what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Inquisition, you could literally change to the character and go through active combat with them.
Oh, that's
so cool. Some people are upset that they changed that. I never really use that, if I'm being quite honest. I use it like OG Dragon Age and Dragon Age 2, where primary combat was with my main character, but I would switch to them for strategic purposes of like, use this, free spell to freeze this enemy, all of that stuff. So that isn't a huge change for me, and I'm fine with that. But in terms of the gameplay that came out, that's why it became my game of the show, because I'm a Dragon Age dude. I love BioWare. I hope the next Mass Effect is incredible. But in terms of like the Xbox showcase, I wouldn't say it's my game of the showcase because we really just got that character introduction. But yeah, you are correct. I just wanted to point out the artistic change. It is true to Dragon Age, but it is way different than the last Dragon Age, which at this point is 10 years ago. Yeah.
I think the other thing is the fact that it was renamed, and I had missed that news. So it was originally announced as Dragon Age Dreadwolf in 2000.
Dreadwolf, which is the name of the bad guy Solus, who that story was cool in Inquisition, where basically spoiler alert, skip a couple of minutes if you don't want to get spoiled on Dragon Age Inquisition. Solus was a party member who's an elf. Basically, as the game goes on, I'm going to keep this very top level. He keeps like disappearing and not being at home base as often. You're like, oh, that's weird. What is he doing? Eventually, it comes out that he's like an ancient god, like a bad dude, which is a really cool twist. And he's the primary villain of this game, so he's known as the Dreadwolf. So the game was originally called Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and it was revealed that he was going to be the big bad, which got people excited. Recently, they changed the name, and they explained that they don't want the focus of this game being on the antagonist. They want it being placed on what they feel is the core of what makes Dragon Age special, which is your party. Which is BioWare in general, right? The parties are always the best parts because you're building these bonds with these characters. So they were like, okay, our party is called the Veilguard. Let's rename it the Veilguard because we want the emphasis to be put on the game is about building that bond with your party members, not on the bad guy, which I think is a smart choice. Dreadwolf, cooler name. Veilguard, better name for what the game is.
That makes total sense, you explaining that and saying that to me. Dreadwolf is a much cooler name.
Very much, yes.
It was way cooler. So that was also why I was a little thrown off. I was like, there's a new Dragon Age game before the other new Dragon Age game, but I was quickly informed that it was just to rename this as the game. And it just, as someone who isn't following Dragon Age and really I've played Mass Effect 1 like halfway, like that's my BioWare experience. So
not even KOTOR.
Nothing. I've no BioWare experience beyond half of Mass Effect 1 on the PS3. And so I'm excited for those people. And there's a lot riding on Dragon Age for BioWare, especially after Andromeda. And, I guess I did play Anthem. I helped.
That makes me so upset.
It was not, I wasn't like, I want to play Anthem. Logan, myself, and Michael Ruiz were working at DualShockers at the time, and we got codes.
Got it.
And Logan was reviewing it, and so Michael and I played with him to help him review the game. It was really us just trashing the game while we played it. So I was not, out here like, let's go Anthem. It was more
best Iron Man mechanics in a video game. I'll tell you that.
This is true. I'm curious, though, how it compares to Iron Man itself, Iron Man VR, which I played the demo for on PSVR, and now it's on Quest, which I imagine would feel much better without the cables and the PS Move controllers. So I would compare. But yes, a third-person Iron Man mechanics, definitely there. The rest of it, not so much.
Awful.
Yeah, it's not a good time. So I am hopeful for Dragon Age, both for what it means to its fans and that franchise, but also to what it means for BioWare and the potential of their next Mass Effect game, which they've been
Mass Effect 5,
teasing. Yeah, they've been teasing. So we just forget Andromeda. It didn't happen. Is what I've been told. So from there, we get I think some more slam dunks, logical things. The Starfield DLC, which was already previously announced, they talked about that, gave it a date, some new stuff, and then a Fallout 76 expansion, which felt like inevitable. You specifically wanted to talk about Starfield DLC. What's the deal with it? Give me the hook.
So the only thing I wanted to mention real quick is Starfield came out last year, obviously. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those games where I touched when it launched, and then something else came up, and I wasn't able to continue playing it. I liked it. I was on the plus side of the reviewers. I know a lot of people were kind of mixed on it. Definitely wasn't perfect, but I do think having a new IP from Bethesda Game Studios is really important. for I think the game industry, Microsoft, like all of it. Bethesda, I think just sticking to Fallout and Elder Scrolls is not good, and I think them hopping into the sci-fi genre is dope. This is exciting to me because I don't know if you're like me, Max, but like the thing that happened with Starfield where I played it and something else happened, it's always hard for me to come back to those games. But when it's a DLC, it makes it easier for me because it's actually easier if, like, how would I put this? So Prince of Persia Lost Crown came out. I beat that game. The DLC comes out later this year. That's going to be tough to get back into because I've already completed the main game.
Yes.
With Starfield, on the other hand, I haven't played much of the game, so it gives me an excuse of, like, just start from the beginning, play through it, and you have the expansion on top of that. Which
exactly.
is, I don't know if it's a weird way to think about
things.
No,
I'm the same way. Look at, like, God of War Ragnarok, and then out of the blue, they dropped this Valhalla DLC. I'm like, that looks dope. I forgot how to play that game at a high level. And so I haven't touched it, right? And I won't touch it until I decide I want to replay Ragnarok. And that's like a big commitment, right? You know, that's a 25-hour game. And then they're talking about this roguelike DLC afterward that has some narrative implications. It's like, I can't, even though it was free and it's high quality and it's everyone says it's great, I'm like, I can't be thrown into endgame high-level combat again. My brain isn't in that zone. But to your point, it's almost like you're picking up the Game of the Year edition that has all the DLC already included, and you're just playing along with it. So that is definitely a boon in this type of scenario, or waiting to come to something later. Absolutely. I totally agree with you there.
And Shattered Space looks dope. They had an update that went live the day of the showcase, which added the Creators Hub for mods and stuff. Added a new mission, and which is so. It's like one of those things where, like, you want to support creators who do mod stuff. So, like, I don't mind paying $2 for a couch from a rando that modded it in, but paying $2 for a couch from Bethesda, I'm like, what are we doing here? But the Shattered Space itself, the DLC looks cool. There's some, I don't even want to mention because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't played Starfield, but there's some stuff that comes up at the end of the narrative that I was unfortunately partially spoiled on that I'm excited to get to when this comes out. But I'm at the point now with this where I was with Cyberpunk, where I was like, oh, do I hop into Cyberpunk? I never got around to playing that. And then Liberty City?
Or no, I don't remember
Night
what
City, but it's Liberty something.
Yeah, something. I don't know. But yeah.
The Idris Elba DLC.
Yes.
Yeah. That came out. So now I waited out, and I'm going to get to that this year too with all of that. So like you said, it's like the Game of the Year edition. And DLC is always much easier for me for a game that I haven't played it as opposed to one I've beaten. So that's all I wanted to say real quick on that.
Phantom Liberty.
There you go.
And that's another great example, and that DLC specifically, as far as I understand it, is like plopped in the middle of the main narrative. So even more reason to, like, if you haven't played it yet, you're in a much better position to play that and its DLC because it would flow better together. It's just
also not coming to Game Pass. I think that's one thing that people talk about.
The DLC
with, like, the
is not coming to
Game Pass. No DLCs ever come to Game Pass for games.
That's interesting.
Wrong,
I guess that makes sense.
Even the Diablo Vessel of Hatred isn't coming to Game Pass. So I think that's one thing where people miss out on the viability of Game Pass, of like, well, these games just go in there. How do they make any money? Oftentimes you have to pay for the DLC for these games, which I don't mind doing. You know what I mean? Like, you're giving me a 70-hour experience for $20. I feel fine paying, $15, $20, $30 for a DLC. I totally get that. So that's one part that people miss out on, is it's just assumed that the DLC is added, and it's not most often.
That makes sense. My brain went into two different places. I was thinking of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, where the DLC is not included on the disc. So you have to, if you buy a used copy, you have to buy the DLC, and that's a whole bunch of hoops to jump through because it's not listed publicly on the store. It's a whole mess. But also then I wonder, like, in a year and a half or whatever, because there's two promised DLC packs for Starfield, right? Like 2 narrative expansions or something.
Down the line, they get added for sure if that's what you're going at.
Well,
but
I was going to
at
say like
launch,
the
they're
Game
not.
of the Year edition, right? Eventually that will be made. It'll be compiled and it'll have all the DLC or whatever in it. I assume that comes to Game Pass. And then, so if you're just, I guess, patient enough or stubborn enough, you could eventually get there. I would imagine.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just trying to think of like what version of a game is on Game Pass.
I wonder, like, are the Forza Horizon ones with their DLC? You know, like the...
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is like eventually when the Game of the Year edition gets made physically and digitally, do they swap out that version for the Game Pass version? I need to look into that. That's an interesting question. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, that's probably something... That is something to look into, I suppose. But we get to our first... So the Xbox comes out and they hit, you know, big first-party games, big third-party relationship, kind of big. Dragon Age I often associate with Xbox as well. I think there's just kind of that tie there. So it's all reaffirming the brand. These are big IP from companies, people. And then we get kind of our first second, third-party type game that's out of the blue that looks really funky and cool and at least unique in that sense and refreshing, which was Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which is the most Kingdom Hearts name I've heard in a while. But an interesting concept narratively, it sounds like. Apparently there's some goddess, paintress, whatever, who puts a number up in the sky and everyone who is that age just dies, is the vibe I got. But then you are sent in a turn-based RPG style combat to fight a bunch of different bosses. I got Persona vibes from it in that way, but it's very French inspired, and the art kind of reminded me of the Order 1886. It was a very cool and unique looking game, and I'm curious what you felt about it, what you thought seeing this interesting game.
First up, Clair Obscur. You're not Sid Meier. No one's ever going to call this game Clair Obscur Expedition 33, right? Everyone's just going to call this game Expedition 33.
Okay.
So let's start with that. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, the narrative seems very cool. Shout out Ben Starr from Final Fantasy 16 fame, who did the narration for the trailer.
Wait, hold on. Cool. I'm confused now. I'm searching for this, and the Expedition 33 website calls the game Expedition 33 Clair Obscur, but then Steam and Xbox call it Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I don't know what's real anymore.
Even better reason to just call it Expedition 33. So the thing I like about this game is it's like if... I don't know if you ever played Child of Light, the UbiArt indie game.
Yes, yeah, I love that one.
So that game had active turn-based combat, which is... I haven't played many games with that style of combat, and I really enjoyed it. And it seems like this game has turn-based combat, but it also has active elements, some quick-time events. Seems like the pairing and counter system is active. It looks really interesting. The UI is all awesome. Honestly, it looks like if Square Enix teamed up with the team who's doing Metaphor Refantasio, the Persona team.
Yeah.
And added in the Child of Light combat. And to me, that's like a dope combination. And the environmental looks that we got of the person running through these worlds looks gorgeous. At worst, I hope this is like a swimming in sevens, which I'm totally fine with. The fact that it's launching in Game Pass makes it a low risk opportunity to get into a new IP, which is always awesome. It was a neat surprise, and it wasn't, as much as I love my Souls-likes, it was nice to see something that wasn't a Souls-like be revealed, because it seems like we got a lot of those. There's so many this blade, that blade, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the combat was the big reveal of this. You see the beautiful environments, like what kind of gameplay is this? Is this going to be a Souls-like? Is this going to be an action game? Like, what is it? And then you see the combat, and you're like, oh, it's turn-based. And then you see the counters and all that, and you're like, oh, there's active elements to it. Very intriguing. It also leads them to be able to do prequels or sequels that are in different years based on the painter and all of that. Cool concept. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, it strikes me as a game that I would give a shot to. I think, like, if I had Game Pass, like this, like you said, I'd give this a shot. Or if this was coming, I mean, it is coming to PlayStation, but like I said, it reminds me of the Order 1886, and I have an affection for that game. And this seems really cool and unique, and I haven't seen a game quite like this before, and that's almost something like I want to support more so than the run of the
known
mill
quantities.
Yeah, the known quantities. That's a good way to put it. So that was cool, and I liked that, and it gave it a good energy for the rest of the show. I think that was cool to see. But moving on, we get our first gameplay demo of the show. More old E3 energy with a game I frankly did not think we would see, simply because they revealed it last year and I kind of thought, it'll take a pause. We'll see more maybe later this year or early next year. But we see South of Midnight from Compulsion, correct? I want to make sure I got that studio right.
It's Compulsion right? Games. Yeah, developers of We Happy Few and Contrast.
Yes, the PS4, PS Plus game at launch. I remember Contrast very much. I thought it was great to see this game in action finally and see that art style in motion. I don't think we got a date. I don't believe there was a date for this. 25, a launch in 2025. The art is cool, the movement interesting. I wasn't expecting this game to be a third-person action adventure, and I don't even know if that was previously stated that it was going to be that genre of game, so I wasn't quite expecting that, but cool, and really the art style really speaks to me in general. So how are you feeling?
So when there were early rumors about this game, the Compulsion's working on this, gothic Southern folktale game, I was like, wow, that's like a theme in a world that we don't really see ever in video games. So that alone piqued my interest. And then we saw the trailer last year, and it had so much style, and the main protagonist looked really cool. The character she interacted with, the guy playing the banjo, it all seemed like a world worth exploring. It reminded me a lot of like a Tim Burton movie to some extent, in the best of ways.
Some Tim
and then
Burton
we get the gameplay
sure.
demo. Yeah, and then we get the gameplay demo, and you see that not only are the cutscenes, but the game is like animated on twos. So it has a little bit of a
Spider-Verse,
a staggering animation to it purposefully. And we see the combat, which looks, it doesn't look anything special, but that's fine though. I think this game, if it even just has like average combat, that's not what's going to be the strength of this game, in my opinion. I think it's going to be like the world building and the narrative and stuff like that, the characters. I mean, even the creature design, we said giant crocodile alligator. I always get those confused as to which one's freshwater, which one's saltwater. You're in Florida, so you would know better than I. Alligator. With the log kind of morphed into, like, decayed into his mouth and stuff, and obviously the catfish. The whole thing is whimsical. It's fun. I did not expect this to be shown, let alone have a date for next year, which is awesome. We Happy Few didn't review all that well, but what Compulsion Games has always done very good is build a world that feels authentic, and you can clearly see that in this demo of this game. We even saw like some dope traversal mechanics with like this spectral scarf or something she has that helps her glide through the air. It seems like the bunny is going to be her companion. I'm curious to see if that holds any gameplay value of what that provides. I'm also curious about the structure of this game. Like, is this a very linear game? Is it like open areas similar to like a New Age Tomb Raider? Obviously, it's not open world. I'm more curious about the structure of it, but
yeah,
it is tied with another game we'll talk about later on as my game of the showcase. Because I kind of, for different reasons, I was stuck on them being. I think this was just a surprise in that, like you said, we weren't expecting to see it, let alone getting the 2025 window, which was crazy.
That's the kind of, like, that's the pace a game reveal I think should have at the most. Like, it's revealed next year's gameplay, and then it could come out a year later. Like, that feels like a good 3-year cadence of just like big news chunks. It's even better, obviously, if you can do the Fallout 4 style reveal where it's like, here it is, and it's out in 6 months. That's great. but on the opposite end of that spectrum, you get things like Perfect Dark, which we'll talk about, where it is announced years ago, nothing, and then it's essentially re-announced here, and we still don't have a date. Like that dragging of a cycle. And the same happens over at Sony. Like, they are notorious for announcing a game and then it never coming out. And I think they're starting to shift that a little bit, which is good. I would like more tighter releases from like reveal to release, tighter windows there. Or I don't know. I at least know what people are working on, but then when we see them, I guess, is really what I would like to see more of. I do remember joking during this particular gameplay reveal that this is essentially like the Deep South version of Wind Waker, because she's talking to her boat, which is
That's
a giant
funny.
fish instead of a lion. But yeah, you're
joke.
talking to your sailing companion. So I think this game looks cool, and I have my eyes on it, especially now that there's gameplay instead of just like a mood piece trailer. It looks pretty cool, and it's definitely my genre of game, and more of that from Xbox I'm happy to look into.
Speaking of PlayStation real quick, a lot of people are saying it gave Canis Bridge of Spirits vibes.
Yeah, which is coming to Xbox soonish. Yeah, I could see that. I definitely could see that vibe. I think this art style stands out way more than Kenna. This is definitely, I think, a cooler looking game. Not to knock Kenna, but this is more compelling to me visually. It's unique in that sense. So I'm excited about that. We get, there was a WoW expansion, but we don't play that. So
we don't play that here, nerds.
Yeah, get out of here. But we do move on to probably my favorite thing from the showcase, and that is simply because it's Metal Gear Solid 3, and I love Metal Gear Solid 3 so much. So we saw the first like proper trailer for Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, which is the ground-up remake in Unreal Engine 5 for Metal Gear Solid 3. I have to say, there's a history of Metal Gear Solid being on Xbox, all the way back to the original Xbox with Metal Gear Solid 2. Like, it's not a new thing for Metal Gear to be on Xbox. But I particularly love seeing this game being advertised on Xbox. I don't know, something in my brain just likes seeing that. It kind of reminds me of like those generational transitions where contracts expired and like Sony would come in with more money, or Xbox would come in and like steal the reveal I don't know. It's just like a mentality, even though that's not the goal here necessarily, and has no impact on the game really whatsoever. But we see proper gameplay and trailer stuff for Metal Gear Solid Delta, and then more stuff came out in the following days as well. This quelled all of my concerns with this particular remake, which is coming from a studio that doesn't really have the history of it. I'm blanking on their name, but they don't have like the track record that I would think of to be entrusted with such a prolific game. Right. And then Konami themselves, not the best stewards, it seems, of their IP when it comes to remakes and remasters and collections. It's very dependent. Silent Hill 2, not looking so hot, for example, in my opinion. I have not played the original Silent Hill 2, but just looking at the remake doesn't look great. But then the Metal Gear Solid, what do they call it? Master Collection. Like, the emulation on that is not where I would hope something would be at, for especially games of that pedigree. But then you'll get the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collection that came out, and I think was done by Digital Eclipse. And they are good stewards of making those types of games. It's like their bread and butter. But like Konami is super hit or miss, and so when you hear them, they're going to remake one of the most beloved Metal Gear games right after they released a collection that like wasn't everything it should have been. I've been very nervous about this game, and I've had tempered expectations, and this reveal trailer kind of quelled a lot of that for me from a visual perspective, a gameplay perspective. They seem to be handling it all the right way. But I'm super curious what you think, because as you wrote in our document, you have never played a Metal Gear Solid game. So what do you think of that?
So I think it looked awesome. Metal Gear Solid is one of those things that's always looked cool. I've just never played it for whatever reason. Everyone has those franchises. And I was in this weird place where the collection came out, and I was like, okay, do I start chronologically in terms of release? So do I play MGS1 first? And then this got announced, and from the little bit of research I did, and you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, this takes place in the timeline first, right?
Correct. Yeah. So it's one of those wonky things where there's like prequels coming out later. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3 and Peace Walker are kind of like the beginnings, and then things progress from there. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid 3 is chronologically game one.
So I have a tough thing with old game is old sometimes.
Yeah.
I tried playing the original Resident Evil and the remake of Resident Evil, and the tank controls are like a non-starter for me. They're just not. It's one of those things where I totally get if you grew up with it and you have the muscle memory and you dig it. I have those games too where I try to sell them to people and they are not getting it. Like, and I totally get that perspective. With these, I'm kind of worried with that. If I go back to the OG games, that I'm going to have that time, and I don't want to ruin the experience for myself because I know this franchise is so beloved. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, maybe because it is the first game on the timeline and it is being remade and it's going to have modern sensibilities, hopefully, obviously, it keeps all of the core made that original really special. I want to maybe start here, and this will be my introduction to Metal Gear Solid. And I know that sounds super blasphemous to a bunch of people out there, but that's just my logical thinking of why I would go here based on my own personal tastes and, the whole situation. So
I played the Metal Gear games, I think, in the order of like 2, 1, 3, 4, I think. So you can play them in whatever order you want. You will miss just the most Kojima-esque references to other things, but like the plot itself is self-contained enough where you will fully enjoy it. I would guarantee that. It does sound like they're matching cutscenes shot for shot type thing, which is something they did not do in the more infamous Metal Gear remake of Twin Snakes on the GameCube. So it sounds like they're respecting the source material. I think, and the gameplay-wise, they have two types of play from a more traditional third-person perspective, or you can play it with the traditional controls of top-down stylings from the original game. So I think that's cool to see that be adapted. It actually almost makes me wish like the Resident Evil 2 remake or the Resident Evil 3 remake adopted that, where you could like toggle it on and have the original perspectives. I don't know if that would be possible if it wasn't designed, but to be fair, they took Resident Evil Village and turned it from a first-person game into a third-person game into a VR game. So I guess they can do whatever they want over there at Capcom. So, yeah, Delta is looking sharp and clearly coming out semi-soonish in the sense of pre-orders are up for collector's editions and things. I think Konami wants to get it out this year, but I would not be surprised if this is a 25 release. One of the few games I think from the showcase that is not coming to Game Pass. Not super surprising there, but it is interesting nonetheless to see it show up here at the event.
Shout out to the weird GameStop tweet mix up with the release date.
So I was talking about that with Logan. 11/17 is the original release date of Metal Gear Solid 3. And so Logan's guess, and what turned out most likely to be correct, is some intern looked up Metal Gear Solid 3 release date, just typed it in. I thought there was like a chance. I was like, maybe they're just trying to hit the exact day, but it's a Sunday this year, so it doesn't make sense to release the game because of shipping and people just going to the stores and things. So it never felt like it would be the 17th, but it was this funny situation nonetheless, I think, to see it like that.
Well, then for pre-orders to go live too, it kind of like made it a little bit more believable, right, when it initially happened, and then to kind of pull that away from people, make everyone sad, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was definitely sad, but I did get the collector's edition locked in. This is my favorite Metal Gear game, which is why I have such an affinity. Like I'm amped. Now you put me in the camp of amped for sure. There are some things though,
camp
like,
of amped.
Yeah, camp of amped. It would. I've heard some like ideas of what would be really cool. So this game takes place in jungles of Russia, if I remember. Yeah, Russia. So like, if they were going I mean, they are going the full remake route, but it's that fine line of like, man, what if they did re-record the dialogue and it was like just straight up in Russian? That would be dope.
Oh, that'd be sick.
Right? And you just have to read it because everyone would be talking that. Like, there's cool ideas I feel like could have, almost like Ghost of Tsushima did, where they were like, we're going to go full tilt into this old Japanese with the Kurosawa mode. And eventually they even brought lip syncing to the Japanese voice, but you could play the game from the beginning in Japanese, like if you really wanted to. And I would love to see more of that. But I get that they have to dance this fine line with the original and new stuff. But anyway, Delta, it's looking really great. I like your idea of starting here, and I think the only issue you may face is if you decide to continue through the series, is when you get to Metal Gear Solid 1 and Metal Gear Solid 2, which do have those traditional top-down, not tank controls, but top-down controls and mechanics. So, because Peace Walker is over-the-shoulder third person, and then obviously Metal Gear Solid 4 and 5 also do the thing of playing in third person. So I think your only trouble would be 1 and 2 in that sense. So I think
here's hoping we get, Konami doing the Capcom thing and we get these remakes every couple of years, and then I'll be golden.
You would be golden.
Yeah.
It would be great. A Metal Gear Solid 1 remake again would be great. But if they just brought Twin Snakes to modern consoles, that would be great too. But anyway, I digress. Sea of Thieves was next, season 13. I think I played Sea of Thieves at launch, which with these live service games is apparently always the worst time to play them because they're not
100%. Yeah.
they're not there. But I did find it a little funny that the PlayStation 5 version was not mentioned, or like, the logo wasn't on screen at all. Like, they just didn't put it there, which is their prerogative.
It's Xbox Showcase.
Yeah, no, it's their prerogative. They
can
can absolutely do that. But I just found it really funny that it just came to PS5 and they just zip, mum's the word. Actually, if you look on the Xbox Wire blog, anything that is multi-platform, you have to, in parentheses, they say see developer website for other platforms. Like, obviously, they will not mention the other platforms, and they absolutely can do that. They're not supposed to do that for me, but I just find it really funny.
It is awkward, yeah. It's a little weird.
Did you had something I thought about Sea of Thieves, or was it just?
Oh no, we were just going to talk about. It's nice to see, as always, games that are getting continued support as games as service games, because these things can get shut down at a moment's notice, and you never know, right? So. Here's the weird thing. It's a monkey's paw situation of, I always want Rare to have success in everything they do. Obviously, no Everwild here. But, like, part of me is bummed that Sea of Thieves is so successful because it means they have less resources for other projects, unfortunately. So, yeah, it's a bit of a bummer. But it is nice to see them continue to support it as it goes to other platforms, like you said.
Yeah, it's a good time. There was Flintlock Siege of Dawn, which had probably the most aggressive title cards I've ever seen. I couldn't even process it. I felt so old in that moment. But then the next game, which you bolded here, Age of Mythology Retold. This is another Age of insert type of game here, remake from the older games. It kind of seems to be the cycle they're on of remaking and bringing forward the old ones and then putting out a new one. At least the last couple have seemed to have been like that. So what's up with Age of Mythology? It's mythology, of course, but what's the deal here?
So real quick, I think Flintlock was the only trailer in this showcase that felt like an ad. Obviously, they're all ads, but I think this is the big difference between something like the Xbox Showcase and like Summer Game Fest, where Summer Game Fest had a lot of actual ads with Samsung and all that, but a lot of trailers that feel like advertisements. And with the showcase, I think it didn't really have any of those outside of the Flintlock trailer. So Age of Mythology Retold, the only reason I wanted to talk about this real quick is this is a total nostalgia play. Growing up, I didn't have a home computer, but when I'd go to family members' houses, they had Age of Mythology, and it was one of those games where you hop on, you put on all the cheats, and you just have fun. The difference between Age of Mythology and Age of Empires is that the leaders for your civilizations are mythological gods. So you have Ra, you have Zeus, you have, all of them. It seems like this one had Loki, which I don't remember from the original, but that just might be me being a kid and not Loki wasn't cool back then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Loki wasn't
MCU,
cool,
obviously,
cool until
yeah,
MCU apparently.
exactly. It's just a really fun 4X strategy game. I've always been interested in mythology since I was a kid. Age of Empires didn't interest me that much. I was more of like a Civ person than Age of Empires. But when Age of Mythology came out and I saw like, you can just, like I said, I put on all the cheats. I'd run around destroying all the other civilizations with Ra's like Sunbeam, just having a blast. And it is nice to see, these aren't games that everyone tunes in for the Xbox showcase. But like you said, there's a commitment to remakes for them, which I appreciate. I forget the name of the studio that does these, the first party studio for Xbox. It's called World something. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but they've done an excellent job at committing to it for a while now. That's all I wanted to say, really. Just a nostalgia play for me.
World's Edge.
World's Edge, yeah. I couldn't remember the second part.
They have, earlier this year, Xbox did like this quad game direct or 3-game direct or something. And one of them was these 4X games, right? Developer Direct.
Our History Untold, which just got a release date the day we're recording this.
Okay. See, because I was expecting to see that, at least in some capacity, but we didn't. But it does seem like Microsoft has this 4X kind of category. They're like filling in the market while games like Civ 7 was just announced last week. But
launching on console too, which is huge for Civ.
Yes, at launch, coming to console is big. So it seems kind of like that genre is thriving a little bit. Like it's got some activity. It's not just limited to 1 or 2 games. It's kind of cool to see. I like that Xbox kind of has this little wedge that they're servicing seemingly well.
Well, and because they're closer tied to PC, right, than Nintendo or PlayStation, that's an avenue they can focus on because they have that attachment there as well, which is cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's neat to see. Then we got the game that I truly did not think would show up because I've given up hope after like 3 years of hoping that it would show up again. Perfect
Especially
Dark.
Recent reports.
Yeah, especially recent reports saying that the game is in development hell, major troubles, setbacks. I mean, when they announced that, the rumors, and then they announced that Crystal Dynamics was being brought in to support the team, I was like, man, there's something wrong with this game. And there is something wrong in the back end of development for Perfect Dark. And hopefully one day that story will be told and lessons can be learned from it and insight can be gained. But Perfect Dark was revealed. We got gameplay. We got cutscenes, big vibe check, a look of visuals and things. No date, which is just astounding. But to me,
hey, you can't say I didn't expect it to be here and then be like, I can't believe we didn't get a date. Like,
all right, that's fair. That is fair. But the fact that it did show up, I just I can't believe there wasn't a date to go along with it showing up.
Fair.
I did not expect to see it, so it was a treat, and I wasn't expecting the Deus Ex vibes, which I was here for. So I'm all in on Perfect Dark, and I have been hopeful for the initiative itself since it was announced, because it when that was announced, it sounded like Xbox was making a studio to make games for people like me who prefer these narrative-driven single-player type games, and that's everything that they've been saying about Perfect Dark has spoken to that. And then it's unfortunately surrounded by all of this development struggles, it seems. And so it was really nice to see it. But I'm very curious what you think of Perfect Dark.
So I have no attachment to the series, but I have been following this reboot, remake. I guess it's more of a reboot at this point, closely. Because like you said, the initiative was poised to be Xbox's Naughty Dog / Sony Santa Monica. It's, they can deny that or whatever, but that's what they were pitched as, the quadruple A studio, right? Make these narrative games that bring in general audiences unlike any other game. And I was excited to see this when it first popped up. I was like, wow, it's here. I honestly, the pessimist in me was, I thought we were just going to get like a CG trailer. So when we actually saw gameplay, I was even more surprised. So not only seeing it plus the gameplay, when there was no data, I was like, yeah, I'm not like it didn't bother me because I'm like I was shocked that we got gameplay, let alone the game appearing.
Sure, yeah, that was surprising.
The immersive sim aspect of it, welcome surprise. I knew it was going to have stealth elements, but I didn't realize how immersive sim was going to be, which I really enjoyed. I love that they showcased the gadgets. I love how they showcased how, even though this is a first-person quote-unquote shooter, that there are aspects of it that are different than other games like it. The ability to shoot through like 3 walls, use your covert ops, all of that stuff, I think played really well. The non-lethal versus lethal gameplay, the Mirror's Edge-esque wall running and stuff like that was neat. The little bit that they showed, I think overall it showed very well. Like you said, it's Deus Ex. It reminded me of Crysis a little bit too in terms of the UI and stuff. I hope this game comes out sooner than later. I hope this game comes out, period. I think it showed very well. It's exciting. I think this is a pillar that they can, if it ends up being what they wanted the initiative to be, and it ends up coming out as a, it's high hopes, but it is what it is. Like if it ends up coming out on that God of War 2018 Last of Us 1 level, I think that's going to be a huge win for Xbox. And, people might say, like, oh, those are too steep of expectations. It's a game's first studio. It's like, well, they pitched it as this. Like, I'm going to hold them to what they pitched it as, regardless of the development hell and everything. I think that if Xbox is going to commit to selling it for what it is, it needs to deliver on that. And that's what I'm expecting, and I hope it does that. And yeah, I loved the gameplay of this because it was so different than a lot of the other Xbox first party stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I was reminded of how little hope I had, because I think actually in the last episode of this show, during predictions, which Logan predicted that Perfect Dark would not show up at all, which was very funny. Again, we had no hope. But I believe that I said that I feel like the initiative would be the next studio on the chopping block to be shut down, just because of all the reports of tumultuous development, having to bring in outside help. I just really could imagine a world where they just decided that this was too expensive to build their own studio from the ground up, which is a very difficult task. I'm not saying that this is easy, but clearly Xbox also just believes in buying studios as well, and that obviously has halted because they just spent an exorbitant amount of money. But I totally envision a world where the initiative was like going to be shut down. I even speculated maybe the game just doesn't come out, and like we talked about at the top of the show, maybe it's just like a tax write-off in some capacity. So that's where I was right before this showcase, and so to see it in action really excited me in that sense. And this is what I want to play on my Xbox, and this is what I want to see from Xbox. I want to see them try this. So this was all positive, affirming stuff for me to see, and so I'm quite hopeful going forward.
Closest thing we're going to get to a Splinter Cell game for the foreseeable future.
Unfortunately, I mean, they're working on another remake of a beloved stealth game in my life. So hopefully Ubisoft doesn't botch that one. But man,
this is a not a great question to ask. It might be a little insensitive, but is Michael Ironside still alive?
I believe so. Yeah, actually, he was in. Gosh, what movie was he in? And I was like, that's Michael Ironside. Gosh, what was it? It was Bob Odenkirk. Remember that John Wick Bob Odenkirk movie? Nobody?
Yeah.
I think he's in that. And he is like,
I just want to make sure he does the voice.
Yes, I imagine he will. He was like, he had gained a lot of weight. He's still alive. He is 74 years old, though.
He's old, yes.
He's very old. But he, was he in? Yeah, he is a Nobody. I was like, that's Michael Ironside? The voice is familiar. He's also in the next Karate Kid. He was like the mean gym coach or something. So it is an interesting career that man has had. But yes, Michael Ironside should be the voice of Sam Fisher until Michael Ironside cannot be the voice of Sam Fisher. It's the same with David Hayter in Solid Snake, and it is disappointing that Kojima went with Kiefer Sutherland. Not that Kiefer Sutherland did not do a good job, but clearly Kojima's ambitions of working with Hollywood actors like seeped into the development of Metal Gear Solid 5, and now he gets to do whatever he wants with whoever he wants. So good for him, but yeah, there are just certain characters that should be voiced by their originals until death do us part, essentially. And Sam Fisher is one of them. Then we kind of, what is this, Diablo DLC next, which had a very, I noticed this. So at the top of the show, there was, the typical viewer discretion advised type warning thing. But this trailer in particular got its own of like, this next trailer will display, I don't remember the language specifically, but scary scenes, violence, the sort of things that did pop up in it. But they put it in front of this one in the middle of the showcase, which kind of, what's the word? Like, caught me off guard a little bit. It was like, oh, we're going somewhere, and I get it, Diablo, hell, all that stuff. But it was a rather intense trailer for a new expansion, correct? DLC?
Yeah, Vessel of Hatred, yeah. That trailer was metal as hell, and I appreciate, like, it wouldn't have bothered me necessarily, but, like, the amount of, like, gratuitous violence they showed, the brutality in it, I totally get why they had the warning. Not too much to say on this. I just wanted to point out this is similar to Starfield in that I didn't get a chance to play Diablo 4 when it released last year, but expansion, perfect time to hop in from the jump and give me an excuse to hop in. So that's why I'm excited for that. And, Blizzard always dominates when it comes to cinematics, and that for as gruesome as that trailer was, it was also beautiful. One thing I learned too in terms of their animation, they don't do mocap, they do hand animation, which is even more impressive that their stuff looks the way it does.
Yeah, if there's anything I've wanted to know, it is or if there's anything I know about Blizzard, it is that their animation is always top tier. So it was well done and animated, and definitely metal. Definitely metal.
Metal as hell, yeah.
Yeah, it was fitting. And then we get another trailer that, light on gameplay, would have hoped for more. This was another one that was like, we'll get the gameplay demo this time. And we did not, which was Fable. But as someone who has not played the original Fable games, I still enjoyed the tone of this. It feels very British, which I'm told is what Fable is as an identity. And I'm really eager to see what Playgrounds... Because Playgrounds has been making some of the best open world games of the generation. They just are with cars.
Racing games.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I love the Horizon games. 3, 4, and 5 are the ones that I've spent the most time in. So to see Playground take their open world design and apply it to a more traditional mechanic style game, presumably, I'm very curious and interested in. And so I continue to be like, all right, Fable, I see you. I'll check, but I'm wondering why we're not getting the bigger gameplay story here yet. Like, what's your read on the pulse here with Fable?
So Fable's my most anticipated Xbox game, period. Like, bar none. So I played the original trilogy, love them. Once again, like I said with the BioWare stuff, it's a shame you never played the original 3. I do think they haven't aged very well in terms of like gameplay mechanics and stuff, so I would be like, just don't worry about it. They also suffered from the Peter Molyneux fake promises, which that guy is famous for. So thankfully he's not attached to the Fable franchise anymore. Mm-hmm. To your point, the humor, everything, it's as close to Fable as you would want from a new studio making it, which is awesome. They nail that stuff. I'll tell you this much. Playground games, I am like whatever you think of a car guy in your brain, I am the direct opposite of that. Couldn't care less about cars. They get 30 hours from me, bare minimum, whenever a new Horizon game comes out. Because they're just so well designed. The worlds are beautiful. There's something about them. They get me to play those games every time they come out. And I am not a racing game guy. I'm not a car guy. None of that. So I was excited when they announced that they were doing Fable years ago. And I do think, Max, that this is, I'll put money on this. This is the game that gets the direct next showcase, the after show 30-minute walkthrough. And I think that's partially maybe why they're holding back, is because I wouldn't be surprised if we saw gameplay at the Game Awards to hype up for next year, it being Xbox's big new release next year. And then I do think they're going to sit on this because they want to prove to people that Playground Games can make a non-racing game, and they do want Playground Games to get their flowers and flex on people and be like, we know you love Bethesda, we know you love all these studios. You may think of us as just the people that make card games, go vroom. No, here it is. You've seen cinematic stuff, you've seen partial gameplay stuff. Let's walk you through us flexing. So
Okay.
that's where I put my bet on. I think they're going to be the big demo next year, and I am so excited for this game. The scope of what they're trying to pull off is incredible to me, from visual fidelity to even like density of the city. Like when we see her walking through the city, that is, I don't know if you've ever seen gameplay of the original Fable, Max, but the difference is wild. To me, it's like, you go back and look at the first Jack and Daxter game, and then you go and look at Last of Us Part 2. And I'm like, I don't understand how, this is like from the same studio. It's crazy to me. Obviously different people working there and all that, but it's wild to me the way games evolve, and I am so excited for this game. The humor and the decision making are the two most important aspects of Fable to me. The combat was never forward. Obviously I hope they do cool stuff and the combat's fun and engaging, but it was the humor that was most important, and it's like the decision making, because before the Mass Effects of the world, they truly did the decisions have consequences stuff, and it wasn't always to its fullest extent, because like I said, Peter Molyneux, famous video game developing liar, he would always promise the world and give you way less than that. But what they did deliver on was engaging and fun. And I do think Fable is one of those key franchises for Xbox that deserves to be. I do think, we were talking about Perfect Dark earlier, of it being the Last of Us, God of War for Xbox. If Playground Games truly nails this, I do think this has a chance to be up there. Maybe not necessarily in like the 10 out of 10 critical acclaim, but in terms of like it being Xbox's game, where we're finally not talking about just Gears and Halo, I truly think it has that capability, because one thing we miss in AAA gaming is like levity and comedy,
Yeah.
And
Especially
if a game can nail that
scale.
humor, exactly. And I do think that they can do something really special if they nail it. And I do agree with you. I wish there was more gameplay shown, but the fact that we got 2025 was huge for me. And the fact that I am of the belief this is their big demo game next year, I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that being the closer, but that actually makes a ton of sense for them to lean again into that first party. And this is the game. This is definitely a game you would want that deep dive into, to see the different developers talking about it and how do they follow this legacy of the IP Fable, but bring their own flair and design to it today. So I like that idea. We'll definitely put a pin in that and follow up on it next year. Yeah, I'm excited to see more of Fable is where I'm at. Then we got the indie block. I kind of call it like the indie block. Makes some sense. With Fragpunk, Winterboro, and Mixtape. Fragpunk was this like team-based shooter with cards. Reminded me of Neon White, I think was what that game was called. Winterboro, some mouse-looking game. I have to admit, I checked out for Winterboro. But Mixtape looked pretty dope, which is from the guys behind that dreamy guitar game.
Artful Escape.
Thank you very much, Jerrad. Yes, behind the Artful Escape. So we kind of highlighted all of these. Mixtape was my takeaway from it, and definitely was one I was like, ooh, I would like to play that. So how are you feeling about this like little indie block they had in the middle of the show?
So the first two I'll be quick on, and then the third one I want to talk about. So Fragpunk, the only thing I wanted to mention about this is, in my opinion, it did more in 30 seconds to sell me on why I should check out this hero shooter over Concord. It's like, oh, why do you compare these games directly? They're different types of games. Well, they're both hero shooters coming out relatively soon. Well, I guess Fragpunk is 2025, but the thing with that is like it immediately showed what made it different. The cards, right? Big head mode, environmental changes.
Big head was
that
awesome.
Immediately to me is like, yeah, and it's a strategical advantage, which is cool, because like, do you play it on a round where you're trying to go up 3-0, or do you play it when you're down a round, and because it's going to give you an advantage, obviously. And that immediately gave me the sense of, I want to check this out to see how it feels, because I haven't played a game like this, right? Which is what you would want. With Concord, like we talked about before, cinematic, really engaging, really funny, personality, all that stuff. The gameplay, I'm like, this kind of looks like Destiny PvP, but like, I don't understand what makes it special. Yeah, I don't know. It just didn't work for me, and it seems like it didn't work for a lot of people, unfortunately. And I hope maybe we get that in the future with Concord, that it's like, no, this is why this is different. I just wanted to point out that Fragpunk, this game we didn't really know about, sold me in a way that Concord didn't, which I think is hard to do in the hero shooter space. So I just wanted to, give it a nice little plug there. Winterboro. I'm not a huge survival crafting guy, Max, so I'm the type of person that would kind of check out on this too. But my favorite childhood novel series is Redwall. I don't know if you're familiar.
I'm not.
So Redwall is anthropomorphic animals. It's basically like children's Lord of the Rings with animals, right?
I feel like I've seen the art of these books before, the covers.
They're probably one of the most famous children's novel series.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love with those. And I just anthropomorphic animal like high fantasy is like my thing. Like I love it so much. So when I saw this, I'm like, okay, it's a crafting survival. I'm not really into that, but I like the aesthetic of you being a mouse and your auntie getting taken and all that stuff. And this is launching into Game Pass, where this is one of those things we talked about before. If this wasn't launching into Game Pass, I'm going to be honest, unless it was getting incredible reviews, might not give it a second glance. But because it gives me that subtle interest of the Redwall vibes, I like the art style. It's not as beautiful as Pentiment, but it is that like painterly, Renaissance-y, like thick, bold lines art style. I'm going to check it out because it's launching in Game Pass, which, I love Game Pass for that, because this is a game that I might not give a chance, if not otherwise. And lastly, Mixtape. I said there was something tied with Fable is my most anticipated Xbox game, but it wasn't the best showing for the showcase for me. South of Midnight, and I said it was tied with one other game. It's Mixtape. This looks incredible. I love a good coming of age. It very much, the art style is that Across the Spider-Verse vibe, which I love. It feels very Wes Anderson, which I also like.
Yeah.
It is very unique. Artful Escape is on my to play list. I never got around to it, but I was very much interested in that. And like we talked about before with Expedition 33, and this is also launching in Game Pass, with Expedition 33 being a new IP that you should give a chance, because these, especially in today's industry, these are far and fewer between, and we need to support the things we want to see in the industry. I hope Mixtape is incredible, and I'm going to support it because I want to see more unique stuff like this. So I was tied for my game of the showcase.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. It's actually, so one thing really quick about Winterboro. I'm looking up Redwall, right? You mentioned it. Getting a Wikipedia article for the show notes. Turns out apparently Netflix is adapting Redwall, so they tie that back to an earlier conversation. Netflix is adapting all the things, so I guess you have that to look forward to.
I hope it comes to fruition, because there was also Mouse Guard is like similar to Redwall. I don't know much about it, but Gary Whitta of Kind of Funny and other more Hollywood stuff.
So Star Wars.
He was working on a mouse. Yes, Rogue One. Yes, very much so. He was of Kind of Funny. He was working on a Mouse Guard adaptation that was like high budget CG. It looked. They showed stuff for it, and it looked incredibly beautiful, but they canceled it. So, long story short, I just hope the Redwall thing finally comes to fruition. It's not canceled like Mouse Guard. So,
all right, we'll see if that comes to pass. But Mixtape, I was saying during the show with my buddies, I was like, this is giving me like that Life is Strange vibes, kind of like the first one, which is funny because a couple of games later, Life is Strange Double Exposure is announced, which seems to be tying back to that first Life is Strange game, which I found that pretty ironic. I have not played a Life is Strange game. It's kind of like this series that keeps happening, it feels like to me. I'm like, oh, there's more for those people who like those decision games with supernatural teenagers and all that stuff. I do remember the Captain
Spirit, the Adventures of Captain
Spirit one coming out, I think, during an Xbox event at E3. I think it was
Shadow Drop.
Yeah, Shadow Drop. And apparently that game is one of those like punch you in the gut kind of games. I can imagine where it goes. So yeah, Life is Strange on the stage, not as surprising. Have you played them before?
Yeah, so I've played the original Life is Strange. incredible. Might be in my top 100 games of all time. True Colors, really enjoyed. Sad that all of the whistle blowing and all that stuff came out with that studio. Unfortunately, that whole story that came out with the development of that game. Played Captain Spirit, which is a gut punch. Started 2, but it was the typical, this isn't Telltale, but the Telltale thing where all the episodes weren't out yet. Something else came up, never got back to it. Unfortunately.
That's that age-old problem.
Life is Strange Double Exposure, total monkey's paw. We get a sequel to the original Life is Strange, starring Max Caulfield, which I'm super stoked for, and very intrigued by the narrative plot of it being 2 separate realities, where your friend is dead in one and alive in the other.
Yeah, that sounded cool.
Made by Deck 9, which, not to say Deck 9 can't make good games, but it isn't the original developers of Life is Strange, which is always a concern. Kind of like your concerns with MGS Delta, right? Being remade, it's not the original developer, so how is that going to work out? I am cautiously optimistic, and I'm looking forward to it. Surprised that it's coming out this year. That was a huge shocker. But yeah, I'm excited for it. Just hesitant because of the developer, unfortunately.
It's like Silent Hill 2 with Bloober Team. It's like, darn it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy for those people. And the plot did sound actually totally up my alley as far as multiple timelines and like solving a murder mystery and trying to prevent it. Like that narratively sounds super cool and totally something I'd be into. So I think I would just have to like get into Life is Strange. Like I'd have to give it a shot. I wouldn't just jump into Double Exposure. But cool. It sounds cool. Next up, we get to the game. This is like, so I've mentioned a couple of times where I thought we were going to get more gameplay. And this was like the third and final one that I was like, this is where we're going to get like a gameplay demo. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which is a hilarious name. But Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. We get this like nice trailer, a little zippy, and then we go into an extended cutscene. And there's a few things. You can hear the Troy Baker coming through just a little bit. It's like, and that's got to be such a difficult job. Like the pressure I imagine he feels to be portraying Harrison Ford in this way. I'm not knocking Troy Baker at all. He is obviously a phenomenal voice actor, and he is some of my favorite video game characters of all time. It's just like, it's one of those things like when you know and you hear it, you're like, it's like just off enough, or like Rick and Morty and the change in that actor. It's like, it's just off enough, and you can tell. The scene itself, though, felt like an Indiana Jones movie, and I think that's the best compliment I can give it. It made me really excited. I think it was just a smidge too long, not in the context of the game, but just in the context of the showcase. Like, I think the scene just went on a bit too much. But it felt like an Indiana Jones game, and I just really hope the gameplay like is nailed. They've said some things that are like a couple of red flags have gone up, like puzzles are optional in the sense of not that a player could skip them, but like they're out of the way and off of the main path, which I feel like puzzles in Indiana Jones need to be a bit more intertwined like that. But I am more excited for this game based off of the vibe of the cutscene and how it played out. And so where are you at, Jerrad, with this one?
So I have literally zero attachment to Indiana Jones. I've never seen a single Indiana Jones movie. I am not a huge Harrison Ford guy. That's probably why I never was interested in like watching them.
Sure.
I like archaeology, all that stuff is something is my stuff. Like I'm interested in. Just I'm not a huge Harrison Ford guy. I'm not a huge Han Solo guy because of that in the Star Wars universe. Just not my vibe. I'm excited to play this game. It's going to be my first introduction to Indiana Jones, which might be blasphemous to some people, like my Metal Gear Solid Delta thing. But
that's so cool, actually. Oh my gosh, I would love to hear your thoughts on playing the game, because I mean, how many people?
Yeah, the voice thing didn't bother me. Like,
right? How many people actually are coming into this game never that are our age? I should say. I'm sure there will be a kid who has never seen Indiana Jones that plays it, but like our age, who's never seen Indiana Jones or engaged with it, what would they think? But that is so cool.
I think most people under like the age of 24 are going to be closer to me, unfortunately, for some people who love Indiana Jones.
That's probably true, and that just probably means I'm older than I think.
Yeah, we're getting there, Max. We're getting there, unfortunately.
Oh,
I wonder
no.
if the comments about the puzzles is misconstrued in that
I hope
there
so.
are main narrative puzzles that you can't go around, but it might be one of those things that's tied to additional trophies or achievements where there's other puzzles to do that are optional. You know what I mean?
I certainly hope so, because I fully could be misconstruing it.
Yeah. Machine games, man. The Wolfenstein games, the last one not included.
I played that with my dad.
I'm sorry. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, he wanted to play a game together, and I was like, "This is cheap, and I can buy one copy, and we can both play it." So,
and who's to know if that game co-op is way more enjoyable than it was single player? I can't really even have an opinion on that.
it was pretty fun to try and teach my dad how to play a first-person shooter. So,
Oh man, I can only imagine. So I have faith in machine games. I wonder how much Todd Howard is dipping his hands in this, because that man seemed like he was living out his dream despite creating some of the biggest game franchises of all time. He's like, I got to work on an Indiana Jones game. You know what I mean? He like lost his damn mind.
it did feel a little bit like Todd was like, "I get to announce this game. Like, I'm going to do it.
Yep.
I've earned this." It also felt a little bit. I don't mean this in a negative way, but like Todd was brought out to introduce Fallout 76, right? Because he's the Fallout guy, but he wasn't the one directly working on it. In that sense, it just feels like he was brought out, and he's not. He's not in charge. He's not the head of Machine Games. He's not in the trenches like he probably more so is on games like Starfield or Elder Scrolls 6. But he still was like, I get to talk about Indiana Jones.
I mean, but in reality, he's also probably the reason they even got the license from Lucasfilm.
Sure.
Because of his track record. Yeah. I am a pro Todd Howard guy. I know there's a lot of hate for him online. But that was weird because it felt like... No. Yeah, I'm not saying you're hating. I'm just saying it seems like there's a lot of hate for him online, which some of it's justified for Fallout 76 and all of that. But this, to me, my one worry, and we've never heard about this, is if like this was strong arm to Machine Games of like, we got the Indiana Jones license, you guys got to work on it, And that's never been said. I'm just assuming that might have been a case, which I hope not. But yeah, I'm excited to hop into it.
It feels like a Spider-Man scenario with Insomniac. It's like, we have a Marvel game. What do you want to work on? And it's like, we'd like to make a Spider-Man game. And now look at them. We know exactly what Insomniac is working on for the next decade. They're kind of the Marvel team now, and that is cool and fine and great, and they make wonderful games. But Insomniac also makes Ratchet and Clank and has made a bunch of other wonderful IP, and I don't know if Sony is even aware of this, but they've made some VR games, and it's weird. Sony has a VR headset, and it's like, what if we use some of our assets at our most prolific studio to make a VR game for our VR headset?
We should let Sony know they have that headset out.
I don't know if they even know. Gosh, what a frustrating piece of equipment and company running behind it.
I'd argue Insomniac is PlayStation's most valuable studio in that, not like per dollar, because obviously you can argue Naughty Dog and Sony Santa Monica.
Oh no, I think Insomniac is per dollar too, based off Spider-Man 2 sales.
Sure, I guess, yeah, that's valid. But what I'm saying is it valuable in terms of their cadence of release and the quality of release.
They've held up the PS5,
Insomniac. Yeah, to me, there's only two studios that deliver on a fast cadence with the level of quality, and that's Insomniac and From Software. Those are the only two studios in the world, in my opinion, that deliver as quickly and as high quality as those two do. No one are like them.
You're absolutely right. And it's so funny that, I mean, if you were talking in the PS3 360 era, I think that list would be a lot longer. Games were coming out much quicker then. I mean,
Smaller
scopes. Look at Naughty Dog. There was the whole, they put out, on the PS3 alone, they put out Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and The Last of Us, plus The Last of Us's DLC. Why am I blanking on the name of that? It doesn't matter. Left Behind. They cranked all of that out on the PS3. And then the PS4 was Uncharted 4, Lost Legacy, and The Last of Us Part 2. And now on the PS5, it's Uncharted 4 Lost Legacy and The Last of Us Part 2 with The Last of Us Part 1 remake as well. But just like to take as an example of such a prolific studio with high output and high quality, to the scopes get bigger and the develop cycles get longer, and well, how do we keep going? Well, let's just remake, remaster, put it out, and keep generating revenue. It's Insomniac is cranking out the games, and sure, some of them are remasters, like Spider-Man for PS4 remastered, which launched with the PS5 alongside Miles Morales, which was one of those, 40, 50, however much dollar expansions, like Lost Legacy. But, then they put out Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and now Spider-Man 2, and Wolverine is next, officially. But there sounds like there will be a Spider-Man expansion-style game as well, apparently, along with some other stuff. So, like, Insomniac has the cadence, man, and it's incredible. They are certainly, I think, Sony's most valuable studio at the moment. If they could get Santa Monica and Naughty Dog to output like that, oh my gosh, they'd be rolling in it.
You want to hear something crazy real quick in terms of like cadence of release? I was looking something up because I was curious. Assassin's Creed 1 came out in 2007. Assassin's Creed 2, 2009. Brotherhood in 2010.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy to look back on. Now we get one Assassin's Creed from different studios, obviously, but that's still wild.
Yeah, Brotherhood is my favorite of the bunch. I have not played an Assassin's Creed game since Black Flag. That's when I dropped off. I did not enjoy the ship mechanics, and I just haven't been back since. But yeah, man,
Skull and Bones might be your thing then.
No, I do not. Skull and Bones is the exact opposite of what I want. I was like, "What?"
Oh, I must have misheard you.
Oh, I did not like the ship mechanics. That was what turned me off of Black Flag. So, Skull and Bones Skull and Bones is not the thing I want. Shadows is kind of, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I just find it hard to get back into that Ubisoft open world mentality now that I've been out of it so long. But anyway, back to the showcase. We got Wuchang. That is me. Fallen Feathers. A lot of games dipping into these Chinese mythology settings lately, it seems. But yeah,
a lot of Chinese studios are now going more global, right? So
right, yeah, and I think that's pretty cool to dig into the mythos and of this. I mean, billions of people, man. It's one of the most. Now, China itself, not really a huge fan of the, Chinese Communist Party over there and the things that they're doing, and TikTok and all sorts of crazy, terrible things that China is doing. Not a fan of that, but the history and mythology of them as a people and a history and a culture. Cool. I'm excited to see more of these ideas, but I have to be honest, I cannot tell them apart because it seems like they all star some sort of anthropomorphic monkey character as the protagonist, so I am having a little bit of trouble with that. But you wanted to talk about this one.
Real quick, yeah. So you're talking about Black Myth Wukong.
Yes, see?
Which I was surprised to see isn't releasing on Xbox. For some reason, I thought that was all consoles at launch.
I thought it was too. See, I'm telling you, I'm so confused.
Also, that one has a lot of development issues in terms of studio culture, which is a bummer. So this one stars a female character with some like power. The thing that I was most interested in is I'm always a sucker for a good Souls like. Liza P is I haven't played every game that I wanted to for 2023 yet, but so far from what I've played, Liza P is my game of the year so far. I'm obviously a little delayed with that stuff, but I'm always a sucker for a good Souls like. The interesting thing to me when I went and looked at the description of this game, they labeled it as a Souls-like, which you'd be like, well, yeah, if you're making a Souls-like, you want to label it as. It's weird. Some studios these days are kind of like, no, we're an action RPG. We're not a Souls-like. So I don't know if they do that to like avoid expectations or whatever. But the more interesting thing is it says rooted in traditional Eastern culture, which was evident. But it said, and I didn't get this from the trailer, but it makes me excited for like boss fights and more reveals, infused with visual elements from Cthulhu mythos, which is very interesting.
That is very interesting.
Because usually it's Eastern fiction thing that includes Cthulhu or European or Western American that uses Cthulhu in a lot of their stuff. So to see a Chinese developer infuse that into Eastern culture, very excited to see what that looks like.
I could have sworn. So clearly, I'm getting the Wuchang thing from the name, which is just me being dumb and my brain dyslexia mixing things up. But I could have sworn there was a monkey game at this showcase. I thought there was a game where you played as a monkey, but I'm looking at this list and I don't see it. So maybe I'm truly have lost. Maybe there was something at Games Fest. I don't know. I digress. I'm so sorry, but you are absolutely right.
No problem.
I just looked up this trailer. I have re-remembered it. Yeah, it's definitely got the Souls vibes, like you were saying. But then they're like, no, we're an action RPG, which is, it's interesting that it's almost like From Software has claimed this vibe of art style, right? And even if you look remotely like it, people will automatically think Soulsborne, or what do they call them now? Is it still Souls likes? Souls rings?
Well, yeah, some people, I think if you're a PlayStation primary gamer, you call it a Soulsborne, but most general people call it a Souls-like.
Yeah, those are the people that haven't played Bloodborne. Oh,
precisely, yes.
Exactly. Unfortunate. So yes, Wuchang, Fallen Feathers. Cool stuff. It seems neat. Avowed next.
I have a hot take.
Yeah, give it to me.
So I love Obsidian. I really like the Outer Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in Avowed. Like I've said before, I like fantasy. This is something I thought I'd never say. This game is too colorful. And that might sound weird, but I think it clashes with the tone that they're trying to strike with the game.
Yeah.
Whereas the Outer Worlds was colorful, but it was a play on, corporations and capitalism and all of that stuff, and it was wacky, and I get that. This one, though it does have humor, it is going more towards the fantasy genre, and I think when you go too colorful, you tend to feel more generic, as weird as that is. And game to me has always just felt like it's too colorful. And I know that sounds odd because remember the days, Max, when we were complaining, why is every game brown or orange or whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah, resistance.
But I just think this game is too colorful and it makes a tonal clash for people watching it. And I think that's been a tough thing for people.
I'm looking at the trailer as you talk, and purple I feel like is the key color. They have purple everywhere. And I did have that kind of opinion with the key art, which is this skeleton wielding a sword, and it's got pinks, purples, greens, blues all scattered throughout it. It almost feels like, in that sense, that visual style sense, it's trying so hard to disassociate itself with the fantasy RPGs that have come before it, which would that it's drawing obvious comparisons from, right? Elder Scrolls, or even things like The Witcher, you could see a little bit, not that it's first person in that sense, but it feels like it is trying to stand apart and be different in that sense. And I'm all for new visual styles and trying it, but it does feel a little clashy with just the genre. I'm curious to see what reviews will say, what people will say, as I always look forward to. I want to see what Digital Foundry says about it from a visual perspective and how it runs and handles on all sorts of things. This was kind of like Indiana Jones. I thought we were going to get a date for this one too, but they're holding on to these dates so close to their chest.
There was also a weird thing with this. There was a date for it in the Xbox blog post, and then it got removed.
Oh my gosh, guys, come on. They're not quite giving everything we thought they would give, and mostly just a date in that sense. I guess they just want to maximize news cycles as much as possible. It is good to see it coming in 2024 alongside. I feel like this can have an audience kind of to fill that space type of game, and I think it's a strong fit for Xbox itself. And it's good to see Obsidian coming back to this type of RPG, especially Pentiment. They just put out Pentiment out of nowhere, which was really cool.
Pentiment was incredible. I loved that game so much.
It's on my list. It's on my list because it's my kind of game. But I have yet
like nothing I've ever played.
I think
I love it.
Yeah. So was that the other one coming to PlayStation? Was that another cross-platform?
Yes, that was going cross-platform. Yeah.
That was the other one. I knew there was a fourth one. But yeah, Obsidian also did Grounded, right? They're the Grounded team.
Yes, they are the closest thing to Insomniac in terms of cadence. Now, they're not close in quality necessarily, but in cadence, yes. They're very valuable at Xbox.
Yeah, they're funky, and I like that. Like, keep it up. Keep doing your thing, Obsidian. There were a couple other games, Atomfall, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Stalker 2. Stalker 2 actually got a date, which is good. Really
it's had a date.
Yeah. Oh, it has.
It was
had
originally
one?
supposed to come out mid. It was originally supposed to come out mid last year, and then it got delayed. Because of the war in Ukraine.
Makes
and
sense.
Then early this year, it got the September date, but people were still worried that it might get delayed again because obviously the war is still ongoing. So it was nice for them to not have to change it or remove it or anything. Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. It was good to see. Great. Assassin's Creed Shadows was like a tease. It was like, check out more at Ubisoft Forward, which I did watch some of that gameplay, and it looks like an open world Assassin's Creed game. I need to pay more attention closely. I was working while it was on, but
you should go back and watch it, the thing that they showed at the UB Forward, because it does a really good job at explaining the reason there's two protagonists and their gameplay difference. They literally do two different missions with them, and it shows the gameplay difference between the two. It was the best part of that UB Forward. One of the only good parts outside of Outlaws.
Oh boy. Okay, I will go back and watch that. I want to watch that and the Veilguard thing. You've piqued my interest to go watch that gameplay as well, so I'll make sure to do my homework there. But then Sarah Bond shows up, and I swear, Jerrad, I thought she was getting ready to do the thing, but she didn't do the thing. They didn't do anything that we expected, so they reveal new hardware. I'm like, oh, they're like, and now we have an all-digital Xbox Series X, and I was like, this is it. This is where they're going to reveal that adorably all-digital Series X. Nope. They just like put plastic over the disk drive. This is good from a like market competitive perspective. It now can match the price of a digital PS5. Makes total sense there. And then they also decided to have I want to say it was $650. It could have been $600. But they're like, and here's our super expensive Xbox, and put a 2 terabyte drive in a Series X as well, in this beautiful kind of space galaxy style Xbox Series X. If there is one thing that Xbox does well, it is create variants of their consoles and controllers. This one reminds me a lot of the Infinite Special Edition console. If anyone remembers that, it's similar in style. And then I think also a new Series S with a color part. Anyway, that was the only hardware. They did not do the handheld like was rumored and expected. They're just like, oh, and they also name drop next gen because they've been doing that for this year. They're like, and we're hard at work on the next generation of Xbox, which makes total sense in the climate of Nintendo Switch successor is out within a year. Like, most likely it will be announced within a year for sure, and probably is out within a year, would be my guess. And then PS5 Pro is almost assuredly this year as well. And so like Xbox just wants to stick in people's mind that next generation is coming and it is the most powerful Xbox ever, which is all statements they can say because duh, that's just how that works. So they just want you to associate next gen with Xbox as early as possible. So these are easy things to say for them. But I was stunned that there was no handheld console at all, especially given that Phil Spencer ostensibly confirmed it in the following interview with Ryan McCaffrey over at IGN. Any thoughts on the hardware side before we get to their closer?
Not at all, but the other thing they didn't mention in the showcase, which was usually in all of them, was like a Game Pass catalog update. Like people were assuming they were going to add some Call of Duty titles or Crash or Spyro or something. And usually they have some mention of it, no mention of it, which is fine. It didn't make the show worse, but yeah, it was weird not to see it.
Yeah, I don't have the quote in front of me, but I feel like I thought Phil said at the start of the show when he was introducing Call of Duty and said it's coming to Game Pass. I think he said it's the first Call of Duty game coming to Game Pass. And so I wonder if they're intentionally waiting to put the catalog. I don't know if that's the best idea, saying that out loud, like especially since those servers are back up for the older ones and the prices for those games went up. I would think just putting the whole collection on Game Pass would be good. But maybe that's something they dole out over time. I'm not sure. Kind of like they did with Bethesda games and things like that. So we will see. But yeah, a little bit of new hardware. And then Xbox does that one more thing. You start hearing a little music, a little Mad World. You start seeing the little gears. You're like, oh, what is this? Gears of War 6. And you're like, Marcus, what's this? And then all of a sudden we find out that it is a prequel, a co-op prequel. Marcus and Dom, Gears of War E-Day. I have yet to play a Gears of War game. This is a big gap in my Xbox catalog. I have wanted to play them. I think I got all of them when I bought my Xbox One. Like, it was part of buying an Xbox. You just got all of the Gears of War games. At the time, I don't think I have 4 or 5. But Gears of War E-Day, the Gears fans in my life popped off. They were like, this is what they wanted to see. It was like coming home for them. Marcus, Dom, prequel energy, like it was like the boys are back in town kind of energy. How did you feel seeing E-Day?
So, yeah, I've played every Gears of War game, which shouldn't be too shocking.
Did you play Pop?
I'm interested.
Did you play Gears of War Pop?
Thank you for calling me out. No, I have not played every Gears of War game.
I always, people are like, Logan the other day said, I'm going to replay all the Gears games. I'm like, don't forget Pop. I love being the guy that won't let that game die, even though it's gone. But I was also, did you play Tactics? Do you play Gears Tactics?
Call that again? No, I actually have that downloaded on my Xbox. I've been meaning to get to it.
I was reminded of its existence. That is not like a shade. You know, like, how have you not played Tactics? I just remembered it the other day myself. But please continue. You've played all of the mainline Gears games that people think of when you say Gears of War, which is totally makes sense.
So the cool thing is the details that came out afterward. We know this is going to be I hope I'm right with this, the first from the ground up Unreal 5 game for the Coalition. And they're also actually helping Obsidian with Avowed with some of that Unreal 5 tech. So maybe by the time Avowed comes out, maybe that's why we didn't get a date, because maybe they're trying to up the visual fidelity and performance and stuff. Either way, this looks awesome. The details that came out afterward were that it's obviously a prequel, and it's set on Emergence Day, and they're going for a more like horror centric vibe where they want it to feel like Marcus and the cogs are like threatened again, because they felt as if the main dudes, I'm blanking on the name of the base enemy, that they were cannon fodder, that they'd become like nothing to really worry about. So they wanted to return to a place where players were fearful of them. And it's also going to show the origin of the Chainsaw Lancer, which is really cool. And kind of like me with Indiana Jones, I'd be very intrigued for you to hop into this as your first Gears, because chronologically, obviously, it's the first one in the timeline, and it seems like it's going to have a different vibe to it in terms of tone, and then maybe go into the other ones. I am shocked that Logan hasn't drug you to play co-op with him. Not that it's a bad experience. The best way to experience Gears of War is co-op. It's a blast.
Well, that's kind of, he's always talked about it, but in our little group of like 5 buddies that we hang out and talk all the time, there are other big Gears fans, and they grew up playing them together, so they kind of always default play together, which makes total sense. And I would love to play with Logan. We've even talked about a chapter select possibly doing Gears. Like, it's on our short list of potential seasons. It makes so much sense, right? Of just co-op games to roar through together. And Judgment and Tactics, and Pop, if you can even still play Pop in any way. So I do want to play it, and I think in the back of my mind, I'm like saving it for Logan in a way, like not even if it's not for a show, but just to play it with him in particular, because he loves it so much.
For sure.
Yeah. And like we did that with Resident Evil. Like, I had never really played Resident Evil except for 7 and Village. And, you know, he dragged me through those games. I say dragged very nicely when we did it for Chapter Select, and it's become one of my favorite franchises, and I feel like a similar way with Gears of War here as well. I on the Xbox Wire, they have a paragraph about how this trailer was made, which is, I think, a little funny. But I think this is actually in line with Gears' traditional announcements. But the Coalition teamed up with Blur Studio, who are legendary for CG trailers. They made the trailer with, quote, in-game assets in Unreal Engine 5, end quote. It features a version of Mad World, which obviously, like, that is a huge callback from the 2006 commercial that they mentioned and were alluding to. The trailer is in 4K with 30 FPS and 5.1 stereo surround sound. But these specs, which were optimized for streaming, do not represent the game's final performance. I have a hard time imagining a current Gears game not supporting 60 FPS or higher frame rates in any way. Like, this was just a mood piece of a trailer, essentially, of like establishing the tone. There's no way this game doesn't support 60 and so on and so forth. So that answer. So I don't know if that means. I would also take that to mean, though, that Unreal Engine 5 is like, it's going to be the engine that's used, and it makes sense. So it sounds like this is typical Gears of War of pushing Unreal Engine forward and doing all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the Coalition is going to be pivotal to a lot of studios at Xbox because they are the Unreal experts, and a lot of studios are going to be using Unreal 5 moving forward. Yeah. They're also working really close with Undead Labs, I remember reading, for State of Decay 3. That's so, good. Yeah, the Coalition is very important to the future of Xbox because of their familiarity with Unreal and their what's probably going to be close to perfection of Unreal 5 in the years to come.
Yeah, it's going to be vital, and it's good to have that in-house and be able to share that amongst all your teams. So it's cool. I'm like skimming these screenshots. They look really nice. So yeah, and then they wrap up with the Call of Duty Direct. More Call of Duty. I did think the Omni movement seemed particularly interesting. I'm curious if that will come to Warzone, because it would be very weird.
It's so funny.
Yeah. Because
they're going to add that over the next couple of years, Max. And then 3 years from now, they're going to be like, we're going back to basics, boots on the ground. Just the same cycle.
That is how it goes. But I was curious about that. I have not played. I actually, when I was at Logan's over in December, I booted up Modern Warfare 3 because he had it. And I could not believe how dull the opening of that campaign was, and I was shocked. Really unfortunate. And I'm sure a lot of that was just a really rushed and cramped development cycle and all the other problems that have kind of plagued Call of Duty development for a little bit. So it's no fault of the team, but I was shocked. So anyway, all that to say, Call of Duty is Call of Duty. But that was the showcase. We had a couple of more notes down at the bottom, which were kind of like nitpicks. You had mentioned a couple of things. No dates, which we've talked about. No Silks on. No one's getting Silks on. The longer that game doesn't get a date, the more funny I think it is. And then nothing Fallout besides 76, which was odd given the success of the show. Any other nitpicks or things you wanted to elaborate on there?
The one thing I wanted to say, this is also going to be part of my, my hot take with Avowed being too colorful. We know that the Outer Worlds 2 is in production, right?
I thought that was going to show up.
Here's the thing. Man, people might hate me for this. I hope that game doesn't exist anymore.
What? Oh, whoa!
I hope that Obsidian was given the opportunity to tackle a Fallout spinoff. And, maybe they didn't want to, like, if they didn't want to do it, fine, continue working on the Outer Worlds 2. But if they were given the opportunity and they accepted it, I would want Obsidian working on a Fallout game 1,000 times over than the Outer Worlds 2.
Okay, I could see that. Yeah, that would be
The Outer Worlds was a fine game. It was a 6 or a 7. It was fine. I would much rather have them working on Fallout, in my opinion, because we know that they're familiar with the IP. They did in my opinion, the best Fallout game, which is New Vegas. and I want Fallout. I tried. Here's the thing: I went and finished Fallout, went back to go play Fallout 4 because I'd never done the DLC. Hopped in on my level 50 character. I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. So I started a replay. I got 25 hours in. I'm like, why am I replaying Fallout 4? I was enjoying it, but I'm like, with so many other new games that I want to play, why am I sitting here playing Fallout 4? And then I got mad. And then I'm like, why is Obsidian working on Outer Worlds 2? They should be working on New Vegas 2 or whatever it is in the Fallout universe. Yeah, to me, it's just I'm not excited about Outer Worlds 2 when the possibility of them working on Fallout is so dope.
I see a world where they are working on a Fallout. It's clear based off that Phil Spencer interview with Brian McCaffrey again. I think we're going to start seeing more Fallout projects gear up here and be announced. They weren't caught with their pants down, but they also I think we will see more marketing tie-ins going forward with all sorts of games. I would not be surprised if there is some sort of Last of Us tie-in when Season 2 comes out next year, whether that's the PC version of Part 2 or they finally, announce Part 3.
I think Xbox underestimated the pop culture impact Fallout would have.
Yeah,
I think they were like,
so.
oh, it'd be successful, but I don't think they thought it was going to be huge.
and based off what Phil said, and apparently what Todd has perceived, is I would not be surprised if there is a Fallout RPG spin-off announced or whatever here within the next year or so to line up with some stuff. So there's that. You wrote down this list, which I wish I had thought to go look up and write down, but you wrote down the list of known quantities that were missing this year. And there are a lot of games that I am curious about, most notably, of course, OD from Kojima and Jordan Peele. My goodness, sign me up for whatever. Kojima anything, right? Kojima's there, I'll play it. He's also apparently working on an action stealth espionage game for PlayStation. Of course he is. If they can't make Metal Gear, they'll pay him to make something like it. So that'll be interesting. OD, though, very, very excited to see what that turns out to be. Clockwork Revolution, which I call BioShock Infinite, but not.
Steampunk Shock.
Yeah, Steampunk Shock. That's good. That's a good name. In Exile, that just like South of Midnight, that's a game I wasn't expecting, but I'm sure we will see more of it next year. The hilariously ironic Toys for Bob situation, where they
Sophie's Choice, right?
Yeah, they left Activision to stop being a Call of Duty support studio, and then they signed a deal with Microsoft to publish their own independent new game project. I understand that is separate and different, and they get to make what they want now, but I just find it really funny.
Here's the thing, Max. I'm torn. I want Toys for Bob to be making Spyro 4, right?
Yeah.
Spyro and Crash are huge to my childhood. I loved Crash 4. I loved the remakes of both of those, though I need to go back and finish the Spyro remake collection.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to be working on Spyro 4. The world in which they were offered Banjo also really excites me if that were a possible thing.
Yeah.
I think Toys for Bob is a very underappreciated studio for what they've accomplished, and it's a shame that they became a Call of Duty support studio. Shout out, what's that new studio? Everywhere?
Everywhere.
Elsewhere Entertainment.
Elsewhere. Oh my gosh, I'll get it one day.
Yeah, I just am excited for Toys for Bob. Two projects on here are kind of the same vibe. Toys for Bob and the IO Interactive Project 007 game.
Mm-hmm.
In the very tumultuous state that the games industry is in, and we've heard how hard it is for these indie studios to get publishing deals now, all the money's dried up. I'm excited that these projects, God forbid they get canceled or anything bad happens, they have that financial backing to make it through. I think it's important that these, obviously one of them is a licensed project, so it's hopefully they're enjoying doing that. But I do think we're in such a state in the industry that anytime you can see these lesser known studios either announce their indie project or announce publishing deals with people that are far and few between, like I said, I'm excited that we can possibly have a future for these studios when at the top of the show we talked about there are studios that no longer have futures, so.
Yeah, I'm certainly not worried about IO. Not only is them making a 007 game a match made in heaven, but now that Amazon owns a significant chunk of 007, like I think they'll get their money needed. IO will be safe. But Toys for Bob, this is super funny. I love it. Contraband, I forgot about that game actually, until you wrote it down. But yeah, that's missing. And then Everwild was the game I thought would show up, and like they'd pop their head up and be like, "Hello."
Really?
I did, because there's been rumors of it, like reaching a better state and like kind of finding whatever it was. I've read that it was kind of soft rebooted in the middle of it, not dissimilar to, like a Pikmin 4, like they were going one way, they've rebooted and they're heading another. But I kind of thought they would give Rare the opportunity or ability to like show a project that wasn't Sea of Thieves. And I thought that seeing the Rare logo outside of Sea of Thieves would be a really kind of good vibes announcement for the Xbox brand. That's kind of why I was thinking there. But I do know that game is also in some sort of development hell, so...
I wonder if it's just like hesitancy because of how bad that first reveal happened. It was awesome. People really enjoyed the aesthetic of it. And then obviously all the stuff that followed happened. And I wonder if maybe there's just some hesitancy of like, let's wait until like more ducks are in a row. You know what I mean? More things are tying down.
Yeah. I think game studios in general are like that more. Like, let's make sure that we are ready to announce instead of announcing ahead of time so far. Clearly, again, just tapping into my knowledge well. Like, that's what Naughty Dog is doing now. They've done the announced games years in advance, and it's not gone well for them. Just from a dev cycle and delaying things, and then that hack and leak and all that stuff. Like, everyone's playing things close to the vest now. So I get it. I get why it's happening, but we'll see if Everwild ever comes to be, and all the other stuff. But to wrap up here, I really am looking forward to the future slate of Xbox. They've been buying all these teams, they've been announcing all these games, they've been doing these things, but I think for the first time, there are multiple games from Xbox, from a first-party perspective, that pique my specific gaming interest, whether that's South of Midnight or Indiana Jones, which is like this big, bombastic, first-party or well-known, established IP game, to things like Perfect Dark from a brand new studio. Granted, it is established, but Perfect Dark hasn't had a game since the 360. To South of Midnight, where it's being original. Or these really cool, unique third-party games like Expedition 33 or Metal Gear Solid Delta. Like, this showcase really spoke to me, but then also I can see where it had the games to meet other people's desires and genres, from things like Winterboro with its survival type game to a team shooter with Fragpunk, or you've got the Titans, Starfield and Avowed, which reached that RPG, or ESO was even there. We didn't talk about it, or WoW. These service platforms and subscriptions, this was a diverse showcase that had big openings, big closings, a lot of highs. This was really well crafted, and it's good. And now they just have to deliver.
Yeah, and one thing we had noted on the document that we didn't talk about is 2025 is already shaping up to be a really good year.
Mm-hmm.
We have Doom, The Dark Ages, we have Fable, and we have South of Midnight. Even if one of those games slips and having just two, I hope and I think all three of those games will release. But say one of those games slips and they only have two of those games, I think that's still very solid. In addition to all the other games, the third-party games that are coming to Game Pass, like Mixtape and Immortals 30, or not Immortals. There is 33 Immortals. That's an indie game that they partnered with, but Expedition 33.
Oh my gosh! Now we had Outer Worlds and Outer Wilds a couple of years ago. Now we have 33 Immortals and Expedition 33.
Yes, I'm very excited for the future of Xbox. And to that point of seeing stuff and seeing the path ahead, PlayStation, just give me that showcase that shows me like what's ahead. Like I just want that too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I remember some of the past showcases being phenomenal and really setting a path for what to expect from PlayStation. And it seems like, I've used this phrase multiple times in this podcast, but it's like a monkey's paw situation where we finally get this for Xbox, where we're seeing it come to fruition. And now we've kind of been in a drought in terms of an awesome showcase for PlayStation, which they were much better at having consistently. It's one of those weird things. Like I just want to see that awesome showcase from PlayStation where both sides, if not a console war thing, but just like from both aspects of it, we have like a nice plate to look forward to, which is a bummer that the whole Insomniac League thing happened, because I think that also tilted people's expectations of like, oh, we're getting Wolverine next. You know what I mean? So yeah. I want them to have a dope showcase so we can look back and be like, Xbox killed it. PlayStation has a lineup. All of us who have both consoles are just going to be eaten for years and years.
That's really, I would love to see that too. It feels like Sony is like really resting on laurels in a way, like the success of the PS4 and the PS5. They're just like coasting this generation, it feels like, to a degree. And I get that COVID has upset a lot of development and extended cycles and things like that, but I really want a good showcase from them. I really want a solid future, and especially in light of all the live service stuff they were pursuing and now they're backtracking on. Like it's
kind of scary. Yeah.
Yeah, that's scary, super scary. So it's interesting. And then, you got Nintendo out here. Like, we're kicking butt too. We just have a different type of thing. So hopefully they actually have a direct, hopefully soon. I think rumors were saying next week or something. So we'll see if that comes.
So weird not to have that this week.
Yeah, summers are weird now. Thanks, Jeff. It's not Jeff's fault, but thanks E3, Popco, or whatever it is that owns them.
Shout out ESA. Yeah,
it's all their fault. They ruined everything. But I think that does it for our conversation about Xbox and the showcase here. Thank you so much, Jerrad, for joining me and talking about this stuff. I always look forward to these discussions with you. This E3 just fest. I love it. So thank you so much. You can find Jerrad online. I'm off Twitter, so I don't know if people are still tweeting over there, but you're at Jerrad Wyche over there. And then Controlled Interest, of course, been on a bit of a pause due to crazy wild life things. Totally understandable, but you definitely should go check that show out and its back catalog and all that stuff over Controlled Interest. Is there anything else I'm missing, Jerrad?
No, I still tweet from time to time. And yes, I'm glad you're part of the, I ain't calling that X. It's Twitter.
It's Twitter.
I ain't calling it X.
I can never uncall it Twitter. What a dumb rebrand. Thanks, Elon. You're the worst, but whatever. It's terrible. It sucks. As for me, you can find all of my writing over at maxfrequency.net and my other show, Chapter Select, which I do with Logan Moore, where we pick a series and bounce back and forth between its entries, exploring their evolution, design, and legacy. You can check that out. We are working on seasons 7 and 8 right now, but we've done things like Pokemon or Banjo and Kazooie. Xbox, I played a lot of Xbox. That was that year, so you can check that show out in all of its glory. But thank you all so much for listening, and until next time, adios.